Chapter 674. Disgust was a very common emotion. But when a person hated something he had liked or even loved deeply, to some extent, it was equivalent to denying everything he had liked before. Those pursuits, those passions, those affections, everything was completely denied, and it was cold and cruel. This was different from hatred. Qin Weibai actually hoped that Li Guangtu had some hatred for Li Shi, because it meant that he still hadn't let go of the past that he had protected and devoted himself to. The so-called hatred was nothing more than being unable to accept it. But in Li Guangtu's eyes and tone, she really didn't see any hatred. There was only indifference and disgust. Have you ever thought that maybe she had no choice but to do what she did back then? Maybe she was coerced by someone? Qin Weibai looked at Li Guangtu and was silent for a long time before she asked tentatively. At this moment, she was really not strong at all. She even looked a little delicate and pitiful. For example, her father at that time. Qin Weibai said softly. And her and your child. Li Guangtu looked at her silently. There was no emotion in his eyes. In the extremely perturbed waiting, he felt the blood flowing through his body and finally gave his answer. Do I need to know? The simplest rhetorical question. But Qin Weibai froze there for a long time. At that time, I was already dead. Li Guangtu smiled and talked about the sword in that year, and his tone didn't even have the disgust he had just shown. She may have been involuntarily, but at that time her sword pierced my chest. I was already dead. Does a dead person need to know these things? Even if she has many explanations, which are inspiring and sad, what's the use? I'm already dead. After she killed me, would she say to my corpse that she was involuntarily, and then hope that the dead person would forgive her? Some things couldn't be explained. Qin Weibai finally understood why Li Shi was always silent when Li Shi and Li Guangtu met more than once many years later. Even in Eastern Europe, when she stood beside Li Guangtu and faced Wang Tianzong, she had no choice. She was coerced. She couldn't help it. But everything was her own position. In fact, she killed Li Guangtu. Li Guangtu could come back to life. This was his ability, and it had nothing to do with Li Shi. No one understood what she had endured in her heart. No one could understand what was going through Li Guangtu's mind when her sword pierced through his heart. So many years. So many grievances. Qin Weibai muttered to herself. I didn't give it to you. Li Guangtu said indifferently. I don't owe her anything. Even if I did, I've paid it off back then. You're right, I could have killed her back then. But I can't bear to. Regret is a matter for the future. She betrayed me back then, but I spared her life. Haven't I paid her back? It's her own choice to suffer all these years of grievance. If she really doesn't want to suffer. Li Guangtu smiled and glanced at Li Shi, who was still unconscious. Why doesn't she die? But she helped you in Eastern Europe. Qin Weibai said. The moonlight shone on her face. Her face was so pale that it was almost transparent. I am very grateful to myself. Li Guangtu nodded. She can help me because I didn't kill her back then. She owes me the life I gave her. Do you expect me to forgive her just because of that? Qin Weibai's body shook slightly. Her brain was in a mess, and everything was blank. Her hands were clenched into fists, and her nails had pierced into her palms. Blood dripped down her palms and dripped on the floor. Li Guangtu suddenly raised his eyebrows. Saint, who was standing closely behind Qin Weibai, suddenly raised his head. The majestic sword intent instantly filled every corner of the ward. The ward was quiet. Not a sound could be heard. Saint was silent for a long time before he calmly said, Boss, this question is meaningless. You seem to care about this question? Li Guangtu looked at Qin Weibai with some playfulness and said thoughtfully, Why? Qin Weibai looked at Li Guangtu and did not speak. What do you want from me? Li Guangtu did not seem to be obsessed with the answer. His voice returned to indifference, and there was even a trace of killing intent in his eyes. Have you ever thought? Qin Weibai's voice trembled a little, but she still continued the original topic. She actually had a lot of things to say here. The identity of Li Guangtu meant too many things. In the next general trend, if used well, he was definitely the most important figure. The cooperation between the Samsara Palace and the Purgatory of Heaven capital, the Li family and the Samsara Palace, the Emperor East Palace and the Purgatory of Heaven capital, Tiannan, and even the Wang family of Beihai. As long as the two sides could cooperate, there were too many things that could be done. However, the question about Li Shi obviously interfered with Qin Weibai's thinking. Her heart was in a mess. In such a state, it was obviously not suitable to talk about any cooperation with Li Guangtu. She pointed at Li Shi with her blood-stained fingers. She has had a bad life these years. Who will understand her situation and everything she has endured? The blood dripped on the ground. Li Guangtu was silent for a moment and said faintly, "No one understands." "Are you saying that she deserves all of this?" Qin Weibai looked at Li Guangtu and asked. Li Guangtu was expressionless and did not speak for a long time. Qin Weibai stood up and looked at Li Shi. Her eyes flashed with countless complex emotions. Li Shi lay quietly. For so many years, it seemed that it was the first time that she had slept so peacefully. "I can understand her." Qin Weibai was silent for a long time before she said softly, "Li Guangtu was not wrong. Li Shi was also not wrong." In the most unfeeling world, there were always some people who lived the most affectionate. She could understand everything about her. "If you want, I can change a ward for her." Qin Weibai turned around and looked at Li Guangtu. Li Guangtu nodded expressionlessly without any hesitation. Qin Weibai stood in front of Li Shi for a long time before she turned and left. Saint looked back at Li Guangtu, did not speak, and closed the door of the ward. The moonlight shone down softly. The whole room was cold. Li Guangtu was silent for a long time alone, and suddenly said, "When do you want to see it?" "Why, when your woman and your subordinates are here? Do you have any concerns that you can't say?" Li Shi was still asleep. The moonlight gently fluctuated in the dark corner that could not be found. A figure came out of the darkness and became clearer and clearer. "I just don't think our next negotiation should be heard by anyone." Li Tianlan stood in front of Li Guangtu and said calmly. Chapter 675. Li Tianlan. Li Guangtu. No matter what kind of relationship they had, because of the Li family, the two of them were destined to have countless entanglements in their lives. They really should have a good talk. But Li Tianlan paid attention to his wording. Li Guangtu also paid attention to Li Tianlan's wording. He meant negotiation. No matter what the two talked about next, this word was rational and a little cold. Blood stained Li Guangtu's hospital gown. His body did not move, and the slowly oozing blood had stopped. He sat on the bed, covered with moonlight, looking at Li Tianlan standing in the dark, and thought a lot in an instant. The purgatory of heaven capital that belonged to him. The Emperor Dong's palace that belonged to Li Tianlan. The Li family was in the middle. A lot of things were pushed forward by an invisible force the moment his identity was exposed, constantly moving forward. Whether it was a collision or fusion, it was something that had to happen. Such a negotiation would come sooner or later. But for Li Guangtu now, the timing of this negotiation was too outrageous. Under the moonlight, Li Guangtu looked up at Li Tianlan and said expressionlessly, "What qualifications do you have to negotiate with me?" "You're still alive." Li Tianlan said calmly. "Then I'm qualified." Li Guangtu was alive because Wang Tianzong did not kill him, and also because Li Tianlan saved him. The faint darkness in the ward surrounded Li Tianlan. His outline was a little blurred, but his voice was extremely clear. "I don't owe you anything." "Indeed." Li Guangtu was silent for a long time before he nodded. He saved Li Tianlan once in Eastern Europe. Li Tianlan also saved him once in Eastern Europe. They owed each other nothing. The silent ward was filled with indifference. Li Tianlan looked at Li Guangtu quietly. From Beihai to Sai City, from Sai City to Yuzhou, and then to this ward. His body was extremely tired, but his mind was clearer and calmer. Facing Li Guangtu, there was only calmness in his heart. Were they father and son? Li Tianlan didn't know, but now he didn't want to avoid anything anymore. He didn't know, so he asked directly, "Are you my father?" Li Guangtu gave him a cold look. "If that's the case." Li Tianlan smiled and pointed at Li Shi. "You, me, her. And we are a family of three?" He found it hard to believe that he could calmly discuss his background in front of the people who were most likely to be his parents. "Regardless, I need an answer." Li Guangtu did not hesitate this time. "You didn't hide it." He gave Li Tianlan the truest answer. No. Li Tianlan fell silent. After a long while he smiled and said, I see. Li Guangtu's answer seemed to have cleared up some of the confusion he had for a long time. Why couldn't he get Li Guangtu's approval? Why was it not recognized by the purgatory of heaven capital? Why did some people in the Li family think he didn't deserve to own the Li family? The reason was simple, because he and Li Guangtu weren't father and son. In that case, our negotiation is even more necessary. He said calmly, What do you want to talk about? Li Guangtu's voice became more and more indifferent. Let's talk about the Li family. Li Tianlan took 2 steps forward. At the place where moonlight and darkness met, his figure suddenly became extremely real. It doesn't matter whether we are father and son or not. It doesn't matter whether my surname is Li or not. I don't care about these questions. But there is one thing I care about. He looked into Li Guangtu's eyes. No matter who I am, the Li family must be mine. Oh. Li Guangtu raised his eyebrows with a faint smile. I want the purgatory of heaven capital. Li Tianlan's voice was extremely calm. In your dreams. Without any hesitation, Li Guangtu gave his attitude. His smile was a little weak, but his voice was very firm. If your surname is not Li, why do you want the Li family that belongs to me? Because my name is Li Tianlan all these years. Li Tianlan looked at him and said, This will not change in the future. You ask me why? Why? If my surname is not Li, why have I borne everything for the Li family for so many years? Li Guangtu turned his head and said lightly, You shouldn't ask me this question. Indeed, he shouldn't ask him. If he wanted to ask, maybe he should ask Li Honghe, his biological parents, and all the people who made that decision at that time. I will ask them. Li Tianlan said lightly, but the answer is not important. What matters is that I must get the Li family, the complete Li family. Again, you don't deserve it. Li Guangtu said coldly. You have your grievances, but the Li family doesn't owe you anything. You may have suffered a lot, but when has the Li family ever treated you badly? The 24 moves of sword, the map of God of War, and your current martial arts are closely related to the Li family. You are now the chosen one in the dark world. If there is no Li family, if you are not Li Tianlan, you will get nothing. Li Tianlan's life should not be like this. Li Guangtu knew this. Now Li Tianlan also knew this. Perhaps as Li Guangtu said, if it were not for the Li family, he could not learn the 24 moves of sword. There would be the title of the chosen one in him. But without these, his life would also be wonderful. He would be the top young master in the whole Zhongzhou state, living in luxury and wealth. His life would be extremely stable to a position that was enough to make people tremble. He would not have to wander on the edge of life and death, nor would he have to struggle with the so-called general trend. His road was extremely smooth, and he could also shine. What was wrong with that kind of life? He exchanged that kind of life for everything he had today, which was not a gain at all. It really didn't matter whether his surname was Li or not. What mattered was that in the past 20 years, under countless pressures and expectations, he was Li Tianlan, and he had always been Li Tianlan. If he couldn't get the Li family, then what was his past 20 years worth of time? I am the chosen one. Li Tianlan said calmly. In this case, you should be more relieved to hand over the purgatory of heaven capital to me. After all, no matter who I am, my surname is Li now. Will you kill me? Li Guangtu was silent for a while, and suddenly asked. Now he was seriously injured and had no combat power at all. If Li Tianlan wanted to kill him, it could be said to be effortless. If I insist on not handing over the purgatory of heaven capital to you, will you kill me? He asked again. No. Li Tianlan said lightly. I'm not surprised by such an answer. Li Guangtu nodded. So you shouldn't be surprised by my answer. I can't hand over the purgatory of heaven capital to you. You are the future chosen one, but now in my eyes you are nothing. When my injury heals, no, as long as I recover half of my combat power. It doesn't make sense. Li Tianlan said calmly. After the chaos in Eastern Europe, you should realize this. You Wang Tianzong, you are both outdated. When everyone was guessing how powerful Li Tianlan was today, Li Tianlan finally revealed his trump card in front of Li Guangtu. Not to mention half of your combat power. Even if you recover to your peak state, you may not be able to do anything to me. He did not enter the invincible realm. But he had a sword in his hand. In the darkness he raised his hand. The exquisite Xianyuan sword appeared in his palm, trembling meekly. I may not be your opponent, but with it, what can you do? Li Guangtu looked up at Li Tianlan's palm. The Xianyuan sword was slowly rotating, extremely elegant, but extremely sharp. A very obvious astonishment appeared on Li Guangtu's face. His expression was as if he had seen a ghost in broad daylight. This thing. His pupils contracted for a moment, and he said incredulously, how could this thing be in your hands? Divine Emperor of 9 Heavens. Chapter 676. Every emotion had a priority. The moment he saw the Xianyuan sword, Li Guangtu's eyes were filled with undisguised fear, but the most obvious emotion was astonishment. It was a kind of absurdity that he had never thought of. In the face of the Xianyuan sword, he blinked hard and even shook his head. In the state of the sword formation, the finger-sized Xianyuan sword rose and fell slightly in Li Tianlan's hand. The dark sword formation slowly rotated, with a kind of profound and extremely profound sword intent. Sharp, and awe-inspiring. It contained all the sword intent, but it seemed to repel everything. It was a pure sword, irresistible. Now it's my sword, not in my hand. Where is it? Li Tianlan asked. Li Guangtu was obviously stunned, and his tone was a little sarcastic. You call it a sword? Well, even if it's a sword, what you snatched is also yours, right? Li Tianlan looked inexplicable. The Xianyuan sword and the 13-story building recognized each other, as its master was a little strange. But he didn't snatch anything at all. Snatch? From whom? Do you know it? Li Tianlan looked at Li Guangtu, and his tone was a little nervous. The 13-story building and the Xianyuan sword belonged to Dongqing Huangtu's sword formation. Li Guangtu knew the Xianyuan sword and its origin. Did it mean that Li Guangtu knew Dongqing Huangtu? Everything seemed to be connected in an instant. He was not Li Guangtu's son. The master of Samsara Palace's support for him came from Dongqing Huangtu. He thought of the Dongqing clan's almost unrequited kindness to him. Who was Dongqing Huangtu to him? Do you know this sword? Li Tianlan raised his palm slightly, and the Xianyuan sword floated closer to Li Guangtu. At that moment, Li Guangtu's body suddenly became completely tense. He stared at the Xianyuan sword in front of him. After a long silence, he smiled mockingly. What's so strange about it? This sword? Who doesn't know it? You know this sword, Li Tianlan said slowly. Then do you know the previous owner of this sword? Li Guangtu frowned. For so many years, the owner of this sword had been standing at the highest place in the dark world. Everyone could see and hear him. What kind of idiotic question was that? Tell me the origin of this sword, Li Tianlan said slowly. Li Guangtu suddenly smiled. You want to talk about your background? The look in his eyes was very strange. You've been with that old guy since you were a child. Didn't he tell you the history of Zhongzhou State? I don't know what you mean. Li Tianlan was a little surprised. I think you are. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. It's boring. Li Guangtu shook his head impatiently, and looked at the Xianyuan sword floating in front of him. His eyes flashed and he didn't speak for a long time. The moment he saw the Xianyuan sword, he really realized that the era that belonged to him and Wang Tianzong had finally passed. A new era had arrived. His injury was extremely serious. The appearance of this sword in Li Tianlan's hand showed that Wang Tianzong's injury could only be more serious than his. Li Guangtu believed that he was at least 80% sure that he could recover to his peak state, but it would take time. A very, very long time passed. Even if Li Tianlan would not kill him, even if there were no accidents during the process, what could he do after he recovered to his peak? If he were in his peak state now, such a Li Tianlan, such a sword would still not pose a threat to him. But during the period of his slow recovery, Li Tianlan would grow, and so would the sword. As Li Tianlan said, even if he recovered from his injury, what could he do to Li Tianlan? Li Tianlan waved his hand. The Xianyuan sword floating in front of Li Guangtu fell into Li Tianlan's hand, docile and cheerful. Li Guangtu watched this scene quietly. He really couldn't figure out why this sword was so docile in Li Tianlan's hand. How long had it been since the war in Eastern Europe? If this sword was really a life, it was really enough to change one's mind. How is Wang Tianzong's injury? Li Guangtu suddenly asked. The Xianyuan sword appeared in Li Tianlan's hand, which meant that Wang Tianzong might have suffered unimaginable injuries. But Li Guangtu did not believe that he would die. With the absolute dominance he showed in Eastern Europe, Li Guangtu also did not believe that there was any power that could kill him. I don't know. Li Tianlan was silent for a while and said lightly, but it should be more serious than yours. I don't think the dark world will see him again for a long time. So is this the reason why you are arrogant and supercilious now? Li Guangtu asked. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and did not speak. Arrogant and domineering? Supercilious? He didn't know what Li Guangtu was referring to. What did you do in Beihai province? Li Guangtu looked at the Xianyuan sword in Li Tianlan's hand, and his voice was a little erratic. Li Tianlan's eyes became extremely cold in an instant. If what he did in Beihai was arrogant and supercilious in Li Guangtu's eyes, then what was Li Guangtu's position now? I just went there to ask for an explanation, Li Tianlan said lightly. By the way, I went to their so-called 7 sword-holding families. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. I went around in the clan. By the way, even though he was mentally prepared, Li Guangtu still showed a surprised expression. Of course he knew what it meant. It meant that after Eastern Europe, Li Tianlan fought through the entire Beihai. Have you seen the old bastard of the Jiang family? DK. Li Tianlan said he died. The almost dead silence lasted for a long time. Li Guangtu took a deep breath and said calmly, so you don't leave any room for negotiation? I didn't go to the stage of formidable person, Li Tianlan said. Li Guangtu smiled sarcastically. His eyes flickered, and he said thoughtfully, in that case, there has been a change in the Wang family of Beihai. You can come back, which means that summer solstice didn't take action, and the hidden danger in the Wang family of Beihai broke out with Wang Tianzong's serious injury? Li Tianlan did not speak. These were things he had known for a long time. But Li Tianlan suddenly raised his eyebrows. The problems of the Wang family of Beihai, the problems of Zhongzhou state and Beihai were indeed becoming more and more obvious. But Li Guangtu had just woken up. His memory still stayed in the period that ended in Eastern Europe. Then how did he know that he had been to Beihai province? Do you know that I have been to Beihai province? Li Tianlan asked. Li Guangtu looked at Li Tianlan mockingly, and his eyes finally fell on the Xianyuan sword that was rotating around him. If you haven't been to the Wang family of Beihai, how did you get this thing? Li Tianlan felt a little incredible. You mean this sword belongs to the Wang family of Beihai? Do you still think this is a sword? Li Guangtu sneered and said, you snatched it and turned it into a sword, and then you can really deceive yourself into thinking that this is your sword. Li Tianlan looked at Li Guangtu. Li Guangtu was also looking at Li Tianlan. At this moment, Li Tianlan finally confirmed that although both of them were talking about this sword, they seemed to be talking to themselves. Li Guangtu didn't understand what Li Tianlan said. Li Tianlan didn't understand what Li Guangtu said either. The Xianyuan sword once again floated between them. Li Tianlan looked at Li Guangtu and asked seriously, if this is not a sword, then what is it? Li Guangtu glanced at Li Tianlan as if he was looking at an idiot. But this time he did not avoid Li Tianlan's question, nor did he ask Li Tianlan to turn over the history of Zhongzhou state. His answer was extremely clear and certain. What kind of sword is this? Li Guangtu said coldly. This is the human emperor. End of this chapter. Bookmark for easy reading. Chapter 677. Human Emperor. The first of the 12 murderous weapons in the Dark World. It was a murderous weapon that had belonged exclusively to the Wang family of Beihai for hundreds of years. Facing the Xianyuan sword, Li Guangtu told Li Tianlan in a very certain tone that the Xianyuan sword was the human emperor. How was this possible? A huge surprise hit Li Tianlan's mind. This was something that he had never expected. Perhaps it was because he was too surprised that he looked extremely calm. Which Ren Huang? Looking at Li Guangtu, he asked seriously. Of course it's the human emperor of the Wang family of Beihai. Li Kuangtu said coldly. You killed DK in the North Sea province and stole the human emperor. Have you not considered the situation in the future? Li Tianlan remained silent. Was the Xianyuan sword the human emperor? Li Tianlan didn't know. He had never seen the scene when the murderous weapon from the Wang family of Beihai fired. He hadn't even seen the real body of the human emperor. However, Li Kuangtu had seen it before. Before him, the Li family and the Wang family of Beihai had been close for hundreds of years. The Li family was no stranger to the human emperor. In recent decades, the human emperor had opened fire 3 times, and one of them was even shot by his grandfather, Li Honghe, with the human emperor in his hand. Therefore, Li Kuangtu's tone was extremely certain that he would not be mistaken. The Xianyuan sword was the human emperor. Moreover, after devouring the devil army, it was now a human emperor that could barely fire again. The most unreplicable aspect of the evil demon army was to implant the remaining materials of the murderous weapons into the human body. After a long period of freezing, the metabolism of those experts who were infinitely close to death would be reduced to the lowest. The remaining trace of vitality would fuse with the spirituality of the materials of the murderous weapons, and in a short period of time, they could erupt with absolute combat power. The Devil Legion's strongest ability was self-destruction. The long period of freezing was enough for the materials of the murderous weapons in their bodies to gather enough energy, and they would explode instantly. Although it could not be compared to a complete murderous weapon, it could be regarded as an attack from a murderous weapon that was not in its peak state. The suppression of the 13 floors on the Devil Army lay in the fact that each sword could absorb the power unleashed by the murderous weapons. In fact, it could no longer be considered as absorption. It could even be said to be engulfing. The Xianyuan sword, which had devoured the Devil Army, had regained its spirituality once again. It had reached the point where it could barely be used again. Devour. Devour? A light suddenly flashed in Li Tianlan's mind. The human emperor had been made into the coldness of 9 states by the Wang family of Beihai in the chaos of Eastern Europe. But whether it was the coldness of the 9 states or the human emperor, the most important material was the same. In the hands of the master of Samsara Palace, the 13-story pagoda became an eternal sword that cut through the sky. The 13th pagoda could devour the energy of the Devil Army. Why couldn't he devour the human emperor? If that was the case, Li Tianlan looked at the Xianyuan sword. The black blade was still spinning slightly, expressing its docility to Li Tianlan all the time. Li Tianlan suddenly felt a little ridiculous. If Li Kuangtu did feel the aura of the human emperor on the Xianyuan sword, that was to say, in the last sword strike in Eastern Europe, the 13 floors pagoda really swallowed up the human emperor? The leader of the 12 malefic weapons was swallowed? It seemed that this was the only way to explain why the Xianyuan sword was so docile towards him. Because the Xianyuan sword was not the human emperor, but a sword that had devoured the human emperor? Li Tianlan suddenly found himself unable to explain these problems. However, he did not intend to explain anything to Li Kuangtu. He took a step forward. The Xianyuan sword flew back and merged into nothingness. Li Tianlan took out a cigarette and handed it to Li Kuangtu. Do you want one? Li Kuangtu reached out and took it. Li Tianlan lit it for him. I'm not the one who should think about the situation. Li Tianlan temporarily put aside his doubts about the Xianyuan sword. After all, this was not his main purpose today. It should be you. Have you thought about the situation in the future? This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. My situation? Li Kuangtu raised his eyebrows slightly. You are Li Kuangtu, Li Tianlan said calmly. The whole dark world knows about it, but the purgatory of Heaven capital is still in East Island. The pale white smoke lingered in the bright moonlight. Li Tianlan looked at Li Kuangtu. If you go back to East Island and Heaven capital, what kind of stance will you take? What kind of attitude will East Island have towards Li Kuangtu? Li Kuangtu was silent. He just woke up and couldn't judge the situation outside, but it didn't mean that he didn't realize the seriousness of this problem. Li Kuangtu and deity. One person, 2 identities, but they were 2 completely different things. Since his identity was exposed, both Zhongzhou State and East Island had been silent about it. Now that Li Kuangtu woke up, he naturally knew what it meant. Both Zhongzhou State and East Island were waiting for his choice. Li Kuangtu was deity, and deity was Li Kuangtu. But after all, these were two identities. If he chose to stay in Zhongzhou State, he would be Li Kuangtu. Then everything he had in East Island, the whole heaven capital, would be mercilessly suppressed by East Island. Now it was not the final battle of heaven capital more than 3 years ago. After the end of the chaos in Eastern Europe, all the superpowers suffered heavy losses, but Wuji Palace and Jifeng Sword Training School in East Island still maintained their strength. The most important thing was that Luxing Songquan and Tianhai Wuji, two grandmasters of the invincible realm, still had enough combat power. When they joined forces and Li Kuangtu was seriously injured, the situation of the purgatory of heaven capital would undoubtedly be extremely difficult. If he chose to return to heaven capital, he would be deity and the guardian of East Island. But once he made such a choice, his identity would no longer be in doubt for Zhongzhou State. He would become a real traitor. He had the right to choose, but it was still uncertain whether he could leave Zhongzhou State. And even if he stayed in Zhongzhou State, he still had to face Kunlun City, which was unusually silent at this time. Chaos. When the old era passed and the new era began, Zhongzhou State was completely a huge whirlpool. Li Kuangtu was in it, and he had never been in a dilemma. What do you suggest? He glanced at Li Tianlan and suddenly asked. I can shelter the purgatory of heaven capital. Li Tianlan's voice was calm as he said a fact that sounded like a joke. Shelter the purgatory of heaven capital. How funny did it sound? But now Li Tianlan already had such strength. The general trend in Eastern Europe was mighty. Under the general trend, the experts of the invincible realm were really like grass. Now that the general trend had passed, the divine and holy lists in the dark world were almost useless, and most of the experts of the invincible realm had died. Under such circumstances, including Zhongzhou State, the high-end combat power of the dark world suddenly became scarce. And East Island jumped up. Tianhai Wuji, Luxing Songquan. Today's East Island could even be said to be the only country with two experts of the invincible realm, who were still at the peak. East Island already had the strength that everyone was afraid of. But Li Tianlan was not afraid of anything. Now he was not afraid of Luxing Songquan or Tianhai Wuji. Standing in the sky without shadows in the new era, he was fearless. He could shelter the purgatory of heaven capital, and even anyone. What are the conditions? Li Kuangtu also knew this, but his tone was still mocking. Give you the purgatory of heaven capital? No need. Li Tianlan said blandly. As long as you withdraw from East Island. Withdraw from East Island? Li Kuangtu was a little surprised. I can't eat it. Li Tianlan opened his mouth seriously. Li Tianlan sheltered the purgatory of heaven capital. No matter what happened between him and Li Kuangtu, at least in the eyes of outsiders, the purgatory of heaven capital could be regarded as Li Tianlan's force. In this way, Li Tianlan really got too much. The 5 countries in Eastern Europe belonged to Li Tianlan. Next, Li Tianlan would try his best to develop Tiannan. After all, that was his real foundation. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. Li Tianlan also had to prepare for the game between Zhongzhou State and the Wang family of Beihai, and what would happen to the nearly 800,000 square kilometers of land in the northeast. Bai Qingqian suddenly transferred from Qinzhou to Liaodong more than 3 years ago, which was obviously a precaution of the giant group. To some extent, once the game between the Wang family of Beihai and Zhongzhou State began, the giant group could even be said to be the main force in Zhongzhou State. This was not only the position of the giant group, but also Dongqing Wudi's current position in Zhongzhou State could only continue to be tough. His toughness represented Zhongzhou State and the giant group. It was impossible for Li Tianlan to ignore the giant group. So once the game began, the northeast would also involve a lot of Li Tianlan's energy. In this way, the 5 Eastern European countries and the Wang family of Beihai, which had already occupied Snow Country, would have constant friction. Now there was East Island. Li Tianlan really couldn't eat it. Even if such a big benefit was placed in front of him, he could only temporarily put it down. Now Emperor Dong's palace had just been established, but its expansion had reached the real limit. The next step was to stabilize it. If the Purgatory of Heaven capital was still in East Island, he really couldn't take care of them. So what do you want to do? Li Guangtu was silent for a while, and said slowly, "Come to Tiannan." Li Tianlan said calmly, "I'll arrange it." Tiannan currently didn't belong to Zhongzhou state. It could be regarded as a good move for the Purgatory of Heaven capital to enter Tiannan, which meant that Li Guangtu didn't completely choose Zhongzhou state. In this way, he could also leave a part of his foundation in East Island. When Emperor Dong's palace was completely powerful, he could also get in touch with this part of the foundation and annex East Island. Calm, rational, and ambitious. This was the current Li Tianlan. He was becoming more and more mature, and more indifferent. At the right time, I will open the gate of the Purgatory of Heaven capital to enter Zhongzhou state. You can rest assured about this. Li Tianlan said. Li Guangtu suddenly smiled. Your so-called right time is after you take control of the Purgatory of Heaven capital, right? Li Tianlan didn't speak. In order to let the Purgatory of Heaven capital enter Zhongzhou state, the first thing to deal with was Kunlun city, and then Li Guangtu. This was a very cruel answer, but it was also the only answer. The Li family is mine, but it also belongs to everyone in the Li family. It doesn't make sense for you and me to argue about this here. Li Tianlan said slowly. What's wrong with taking them all to Tiannan and giving everyone a chance to choose? Are you so confident? Li Guangtu smiled faintly. I will take everything of the Li family back to the peak, even beyond the peak, beyond the Wang family of Beihai. Such a Li family is the best. Don't you like it? Li Tianlan didn't answer the question. Li Guangtu was silent for a long time before he whispered, "That's really good." But his tone was a little complicated. It's not mine. What's the use of being good? Li Tianlan looked at him, and didn't speak for a long time. Until a cell phone ring suddenly sounded. The sharp ringing of the bell cut through the night, making people panic. Li Tianlan took out his cell phone and looked at the number. It was the phone number of Zhou Yuanshan, the current governor of Jiangxia. In the deep and silent night, the moment he saw the number, Li Tianlan's heart sank for no reason. He couldn't describe this feeling, but the inexplicable premonition made him extremely cold. He took a deep breath and answered the phone. Brother-in-law. Tianlan. Zhou Yuanshan's voice was still steady, but with a slight tremble. Are you back to Yuzhou? Li Tianlan said yes. When he came to Yuzhou, he first went to see Dongqing Rushi, and then came to Li Guangtu. Bai Qingqian, who had been staying in the ward, was the first to know the news of his return. Zhou Yuanshan was silent for a moment, and then he said hoarsely, "Come to Linen." He paused, and then his hoarse voice rang in Li Tianlan's ear like a bolt from the blue. The old master is dying. Anyway, you have to see him for the last time. End of this chapter. Bookmark for easy reading. Chapter 678. Clap. In the silent ward, with a crisp sound, the cell phone with the screen on slipped from Li Tianlan's hand and fell to the ground. Li Tianlan's mind went blank. He had fought through Beihai, killed DK, and defeated Dijiang. At this moment he, who was getting stronger and stronger, seemed to suddenly lose all his strength. His body shook and he took 2 steps back. With a dull sound his back hit the wall. No one knew what Li Honghe meant to Li Tianlan. He was an indestructible mountain, a giant pillar that held up the sky, a blazing sun, and a light in the dark. Childhood, and adolescence. During the most bitter and tiring, but also the most reassuring period of his life, Li Honghe had been by his side. They were in the military camp, which meant the lowest point of the Li family. In the primeval forest where there was only heat and not much sunshine all year round, and in front of the cemetery where countless victims of the Li family were buried, Li Honghe showed him a way. It was steep, dangerous, and full of thorns, but it was the only way. At that time, Li Tianlan could not see the end of the road. Now Li Tianlan could not see the end of the road either. But Li Tianlan did not even think about it, and kept rushing down the road. Blood and death, crisis and temptation, conspiracy and trap, life and death and separation. In the face of all these, Li Tianlan never flinched, because he knew very well that Li Honghe was watching him behind him no matter what. Now he was still sprinting on this road. When all the thorns and mud were left behind by him, the figure who was also watching him behind him finally fell down. The person he cared about the most, respected the most, and worshipped the most. For many years, even if his figure was no longer tall, even if his spirit was gradually declining, even if his eyes became old, Li Tianlan never thought that he would fall down. But now, when the road ahead of him became flat, wide, and full of sunshine and light, he was about to sprint. But Zhou Yuanshan's call told him that Grandpa could not make it. What did he mean? How could he not make it? Li Tianlan's mind was in a mess. He shook his head hard and tried to stand firm to pick up the phone. But as soon as he took a step, he fell down again. There was no light in the ward, and the phone screen was still on, shining faintly. The corner of Li Tianlan's mouth moved. Pooh. He spat out a mouthful of blood. He struggled to grab the phone and put it back to his ear. Tianlan? Tianlan? On the phone, Zhou Yuanshan's voice was still ringing. Li Tianlan said. His voice was extremely steady, but the hand holding the phone kept shaking, and his eyes were full of confusion. Come back first. Zhou Yuanshan said in a low voice. The old man has been in a coma for several days. His condition is very bad. I want to ask for your opinion. If you have no other requirements, I have already planned to inform the Parliament of Zhongzhou State. Parliament? Li Tianlan murmured and repeated the words. This isn't just about your family. Zhou Yuanshan smiled bitterly and said with mixed feelings. Old Li's life and death is a national affair. This was indeed a national affair. After all, Li Honghe was once the patron saint of Zhongzhou State. Even if he had been standing in the darkness that most people could not see, no one dared to deny his achievements. His death might not be on the news broadcast of Zhongzhou State like other giants, and everyone knew about it. But in fact he would receive no less treatment than anyone else. The news about Li Honghe had been tightly blocked. But seeing that everything had come to the end, it was meaningless to block it. Among the 9 directors of Zhongzhou State Parliament, one was currently visiting Europe, and the other was going to visit Africa in a few days. These things had to stop, and the directors abroad had to return in advance. This was the end of an era. Combined with Li Tianlan's current momentum, the 9 directors of Zhongzhou State had their reasons to be present. Li Tianlan was silent for a long time. He supported Li Guangtu's bed to stand up and said hoarsely, I'm going. Zhou Yuanshan said, I've arranged a special plane at No. 6 Air Force Base. Li Tianlan said yes and hung up the phone. The blankness and emptiness of suddenly hearing the bad news gradually became clear and faint. Li Tianlan's expression was stiff, but his eyes involuntarily turned red. Li Guangtu had been looking at him for a long time. Grandpa is leaving. He glanced at Li Guangtu and forced himself to speak calmly. In the hazy moonlight, Li Guangtu's expression seemed to freeze all of a sudden. Everything in the room became frozen. After a long time, Li Guangtu said with some difficulty, Where are you going? Li Tianlan didn't answer this unnecessary question. He glanced at Li Guangtu and said, Get ready. Where are you going? Li Guangtu asked again. Li Tianlan frowned. But at this time he was no longer in the mood to fight with the other party. I'll stay here. Li Guangtu's eyes returned to indifference. He and Li Tianlan were not father and son. But Li Honghe and he were father and son. But whether it was to Li Tianlan or to Li Honghe, Li Guangtu showed only indifference. Li Tianlan raised his palm. Countless sword intents appeared in the ward, entangling Li Guangtu's body layer by layer. Li Guangtu's body remained stiff in the original posture, unable to move. It's not up to you, he whispered. You have to go to Linen with me. There were more and more sword intents in the room, more and more dense, entangling Li Guangtu's body layer by layer. Li Guangtu's figure became blurred and dim in the endless sword intents, and finally was completely hidden by the sword intents. Li Tianlan turned around and went out. He took out his mobile phone and dialed Qin Weibai's number. The phone was quickly connected. Qin Weibai's soft voice sounded. You're back. I'm in the hospital. Li Tianlan's voice was dry. Get ready, we're going to Linen. Qin Weibai was silent for a moment. She seemed to know what had happened and answered obediently. Will Saint go? He should go back to the southwest. Li Tianlan whispered. With Wei Kunlun's identity, even if he went to Lin, he would go on behalf of Mount Shu. Got it. Qin Weibai said. I'm going out now. Li Tianlan silently put down his mobile phone and walked out of the hospital. Li Guangtu, who was bound by layers of sword intense, floated in the air, almost fixed above Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan glanced at him. The moonlight all over the sky was clear and cold. Li Guangtu's eyes were still cold and emotionless. Li Tianlan suddenly felt a little lonely. The news that Li Honghe was about to die was constantly spread as a national affair in Zhongzhou State. At this moment, Li Tianlan really realized that in the future, the Li family that belonged to him, he was the only one left. Chapter 679. Li Tianlan was not the only one who was unprepared for Li Honghe's departure. Even the entire Zhongzhou State was not prepared for Li Honghe's departure. When the news from Lin spread to Yuzhou Province and the entire Zhongzhou State became silent after an uproar. No one dared to deny Li Honghe's achievements to Zhongzhou State. When the Li family was glorious, he was the god of war of Zhongzhou State. Even when the Li family was down and out, the Li family's camp was still on the border of Zhongzhou State. He was one of the few old people left in Zhongzhou State. He had been in Zhongzhou State for so long that almost everyone had gotten used to it. It seemed that as long as he was in Zhongzhou State, no matter what situation he was in, the entire Zhongzhou State would be at ease. This belief was not inexplicable, and there were also examples that could prove it. More than 3 years ago, during the decisive battle in Heaven Capital, the 5 superpowers united with Annan State to invade the border of Zhongzhou State. The human emperor opened fire. Under the leadership of Dongqing Wudi, the Blood Battalion penetrated 800 miles into Annan State and finally conquered Tiannan, a place that was still unoccupied. At the beginning of the chaos, it was not only the Bloodbath Legion that blocked the elites of the 5 major forces and the Annan rebel army. There was also the Li family. In that battle, all the members of the Li family who had few members left were mobilized and defeated the elites of the 5 forces. Li Honghe had been standing on the front line of the battle without retreating. All the major groups in Zhongzhou State had reasons to respect Li Honghe, no matter where they stood. He had stood in Zhongzhou State all his life with a clear conscience. The era when Zhongzhou State was guarded by him was the best era. A hero is past his prime. Time is merciless. It was not that no one thought that Li Honghe would leave, but no one had ever thought that this day would come so quickly and so suddenly. As soon as he received the news, a member of the Parliament of Zhongzhou State who was visiting Europe had already boarded the plane to return to Zhongzhou State overnight. All recent foreign affairs activities of Zhongzhou State were cancelled. The Core Council of Zhongzhou State convened overnight. Before dawn, all 29 members of the Zhongzhou State Parliament received the news. The Special Warfare Headquarters and the Supervisory Council of Zhongzhou State were notified at the same time. The news was passed down to the Speaker of Parliament, the Governor, and the Director of the Special Operations Bureau of each province in Zhongzhou State. All the generals of Zhongzhou State received the news in the morning. Later, some old people who had held important positions in Zhongzhou State also received the news. Everyone who received the message was silently handling their work at their posts. But no one went out of the country, and no one set off for Lin for the time being. But the hill in West Lake in Lin had become the focus of Zhongzhou State's attention. Everyone was waiting patiently, waiting for the end of a great piece of history. September 20th. It was the 7th day since Li Honghe had been in a coma. The news that the former guardian of Zhongzhou State was about to reach the end of his life finally spread out. The whole dark world was silent. Li Tianlan arrived at Lonely Mountain with Qin Weibai that night. Yes, Lonely Mountain. Li Honghe insisted on not going to the hospital. He used to be an expert at the peak of the invincible realm. As a martial artist, he had the clearest judgment of his body. Li Honghe was not sick. This could be said to be an injury, but it could also be said to be an extreme overdraft after years of overdrafting his life force to maintain his peak state. Under such circumstances, it was meaningless to go to the hospital. He was lying in the cabin he had built with his own hands in Lonely Mountain, facing the vast cemetery of the Li family. He slept quietly, without any sadness or joy. Li Tianlan had been staying by Li Honghe's side. For 7 days, he hardly ate or rested. Most of the time he sat beside Li Honghe, holding his hand, motionless and silent. She was sitting next to Li Honghe, holding his hand, motionless and silent. Dongcheng Rushi in Yuzhou. Tribulation in Taibai Mountain. Tribulation in Taibai Mountain. Wang Yuetong in Beihai. Li Honghe in Linen. More and more people were getting farther and farther away from him, even leaving forever. His life was already infinitely bright and radiant, but in his most beautiful time, in the process of his triumphant progress, perhaps such parting would happen more and more often. So often that he would feel numb and cold, but at least until now he could not accept such parting. His heart ached. It hurt like a knife. The master of Samsara Palace, Tribulation, Dongqing Rushi, Wang Yuetong, Li Honghe. Countless people swayed in front of his eyes, fiercely attacking his heart. His will was exhausted, but he still held on. Even he didn't know how long he should hold on. Would you like to eat something? With light footsteps, Qin Weibai stepped over the simple threshold and came to Li Tianlan's side. Her soft voice was a little pleading. I made it myself. It's all your favorite food. Li Tianlan held Li Honghe's palm and put it to his mouth. In just a few days, the skin on Li Honghe's hand had become completely dry and loose. His body had completely collapsed soft, and he could hardly feel a trace of strength. Li Tianlan looked at him quietly, shook his head, and didn't speak. Your Highness, we need to check Senior Li's condition further. You need to leave for a while. Why don't you eat something with Boss Qin? After all, your health is the first priority. An elegant and gentle voice rang out behind Li Tianlan. The voice was extremely strange. Li Tianlan turned his head blankly. In his sight, it was a young woman in her 20s who came in with Qin Weibai. She had a simple face, wore a clean and neat sterile suit, and had a quiet smile. This was not a woman who would make people feel breathtaking at first glance, but she was a woman who made people feel more comfortable the more they looked at her. Her beauty was so calm and collected, like gentle water, soft and cool, with a kind of elegance and tranquility that seemed to seep into one's bones. Li Tianlan looked at her quietly and asked, Who are you? My name is Nalan Qingyu. The woman smiled and reached out her hand, calm and composed. The Nalan family. The physician king family of Zhongzhou State. On the second day after Li Tianlan arrived in Linen, the Nalan family had already sent a rather luxurious medical team, led by Nalan Dongfeng, the leader of the Nalan family, the #1 doctor in Zhongzhou State. 8 famous doctors from the Nalan family discussed Li Honghe's physical condition day and night on Lonely Mountain. It was said that their arrival was ordered by Summer Solstice, the hostess of the Wang family of Beihai. After Li Tianlan swept Beihai, Summer Solstice's move was full of sincerity, but Li Tianlan had never talked to them in depth. In the past few days, the Nalan family had used all their methods. Obviously, they were also at a loss for Li Honghe's current condition. But Nalan Qingyu? Li Tianlan had never heard of this name, but he was sure that this woman was not in the Nalan family's medical team. A newcomer? Li Tianlan was excited for a moment, and his eyes became extremely eager. Do you have a way to save Grandpa? Nalan Qingyu's elegant smile had a hint of sadness. I'm afraid it will be very difficult, she said softly. I agree with my father's conclusion. Old Li's body doesn't have any symptoms. Without any symptoms, there's naturally no way to cure it. Old Li's current condition is that he has overdrawn his life force. For a long period of time, at least 10 years, he has been forcefully protecting his peak state by overdrawing his life force. His body has been severely damaged and his life force has been completely exhausted, so. She did not continue. Li Tianlan's eyes grew brighter and brighter. Vitality, vitality, he muttered to himself and suddenly said, If there's immortality, is it possible? When he said this, his eyes were unusually fierce. He had no immortality, but the Wang family of Beihai did. If he could save Li Honghe, he would do anything. If it's useful, we've used it already, Nalan Qingyu said with a wry smile. In fact, Auntie asked us to come to Lonely Mountain this time. We brought an immortality potion for Old Li to use. This can even be counted as outside of the deal between you and the Wang family of Beihai. It's something that Mount Dibbing voluntarily offered. But the current situation, immortality is not omnipotent. At present, the Wang family of Beihai's immortality potion has not broken through the existing technical bottleneck. It can directly increase the human body's life force, but it's just a pure increase. Old Li's life force is almost completely exhausted now. Immortality doesn't work on him at all. Her voice was a little regretful, but she had not said some words yet. If there were a few more years, if Old Li could hold on for a few more years, maybe everything would be different. She thought of her sister Silver Eyes, who was now a core figure of the Wang family of Beihai. Nalan Shuriying. Now Nalan Shuriying was trying her best to overcome the technical bottleneck of the immortality potion. The existing immortality potion was heaven-defying enough. It could almost ignore any injury. No matter how serious the injury was, as long as there was a certain vitality, it could be healed immediately under the stimulation of immortality potion. But the expected third generation of immortality potion was to fully activate the human body's vitality. Even if the vitality was exhausted, the human body could be completely activated with the vitality of the immortality potion. Such a potion could almost be said to be truly beyond life and death. Li Honghe's situation was not a problem at all in the new generation of immortality potion. But unfortunately, Li Honghe had no time. Nalan Shuriying had no time either. Li Tianlan stood in front of Li Honghe's bed and was silent for a long time. He had never known what Li Honghe had paid over the years to maintain his peak state. Now that the truth had come to light, he no longer had the chance to salvage everything. In that camp, in that primeval forest, in this lonely mountain, he maintained his state almost cruelly. Why? Li Tianlan knew very well that his grandfather did this for his Li family, not for Li Guangtu's purgatory of heaven capital. Li Tianlan clenched his fists, gritted his teeth, and said nothing. Let's go out first. Qin Weibai gently pulled the corner of Li Tianlan's clothes. The Parliament and the major special warfare headquarters have sent a lot of condolences these days. You should respond. Li Tianlan was silent for a while and suddenly asked, what about Kunlun City? Nalan Qingyu carefully examined Li Honghe's body. Qin Weibai froze for a moment and said softly, Kunlun City hasn't responded yet. Yes, no response. In Zhongzhou State today, facing Li Honghe's body, Kunlun City was the quietest one. They didn't respond at all, and didn't even do anything to save face. Their only response was silence. The weird silence made everyone feel uneasy. Li Tianlan sneered and didn't speak. A lot of what people are discussing is that the holes are not filled in well, and the explanation is perfunctory, and so on. In fact, it has nothing to do with holes. The only reason is that the author is not in a good state. So the holes are not filled in well, and the explanation is not done well. Just pretend that they are not filled in well. They will always pull them out and fill them again. They will definitely. Chapter 680. Except for a limited number of people involved, no one knew that Kunlun City, which had been silent about Li Honghe's physical condition, and seemed to be indifferent, was actually the force that paid the most attention to Li Honghe. Gu Xingyun's injury had become more and more serious. On that day, Situ Songyue and the murderous weapon-setting sun hit him in the chest at a close distance. Then he was attacked by Lin Yuxian and Li Tianlan. In the maneuver of the two academies, he had been delaying and suppressing his injury. With such a serious injury, it was a miracle that Gu Xingyun could not die. This also showed that Kunlun City's martial arts were indeed extremely solid. However, there was a limit to any strong support. After the day of eradication in Eastern Europe, all those who knew Li Shi's identity could see the position of the hostess of Kunlun City. Some past events seemed to be exposed intentionally or unintentionally. Vague rumors were spreading in every corner of the city. For example, Li Shi was Li Guangtu's woman, but now she became the wife of the governor of Kunlun City. For example, Li Shi was secretly arranged by the Gu family to stay with Li Guangtu. The Gu family had endured for many years, and finally overthrew the Li family, and succeeded in ascending the throne. In fact, such a story did not sound like an epic or tragic enemy, and it was even more shameful to Gu Xingyun. Countless eyes in Zhongzhou State that were secretly watching Kunlun City were so strange in Gu Xingyun's eyes. Every piece of news seemed to be secretly reminding him of the exuberant and vibrant green above his head that was comparable to the grassland. This was a knot in his heart that he could not let go for many years. With Li Shi's change of position, gradually, sporadic people began to mention the treason case. This was a major event that caused a sensation in Zhongzhou State, and even the world. But except for the participants, few other people knew the inside story. Li Shi played an extremely important role in the treason case. This was something that very few people knew. But after many years, Li Shi, who killed Li Guangtu, stood beside Li Guangtu again when she was unrestrained after Gu Xingyun and Gu Qianchuan were seriously injured. This might not explain how the treason case was. But when all the things were linked together, at least there was a reason for Zhongzhou State to re-examine the treason case. Similar voices began to sprout quickly. Gu Xingyun, who had been suppressing his injuries, completely broke out in the face of pressure, humiliation, and fear. He vomited blood and fainted. He was immediately sent to the core recuperation base of Kunlun City. Some healing medicines in stock in Zhongzhou State were blended into nutrient solution. Gu Xingyun lay in the nutrient chamber all day long. Although he was still unconscious, his condition had stabilized. Then Li Tianlan swept across Beihai province. Then, the news that Li Honghe was about to die exploded in Zhongzhou State like a heavy bomb. The Li family suddenly became the focus. After Kunlun City confirmed that Li Guangtu had woken up and appeared in Lin, and Gu Qianchuan, who was temporarily in charge of everything in Kunlun City, could no longer sit still and directly force Gu Xingyun to wake up. Every high-level official in Kunlun City knew what Li Guangtu's appearance in Lin meant. The traitor, who had caused great losses to Zhongzhou State many years ago, was now in Zhongzhou State, but the high-level officials of Zhongzhou State had been silent about it. This subtle attitude was a complete nightmare for Kunlun City. As long as Li Guangtu mentioned the case of treason that year, a casual sentence could cause a huge storm to Kunlun City. It was the 8th day since Li Honghe had been in a coma. It was also the 8th day since Gu Xingyun was forced to wake up. Gu Xingyun's face was still pale, his figure was thin, and his hair was dry, but his mental state gradually stabilized. The wind and snow drifted over the city all year round on Kunlun Mountain. Gu Xingyun sat in an exquisite small yard, silently watching the secret report from Kunlun City from Linen. Gu Qianchuan sat in front of him, and also said nothing. Like Gu Xingyun, he was seriously injured. Before the maneuver of the two academies, Li Tianlan directly cut off one of his arms, and then he was seriously injured by Xian Yuanfang's sword intent in Beijiang. Compared with Gu Xingyun, his injury was not fatal, but under the great pressure his eyes were sunken, and he looked equally haggard. Is there any way? He looked at Gu Xingyun and asked calmly. Nothing happened. What can I do? Gu Xingyun shook his head. Nailan Qingyu arrived in Lin last night, but Li Honghe still hasn't woken up. With a complicated look in his eyes he said, Li Honghe really can't hold on this time. Where is Li Guangtu? Gu Qianchuan was mentally unbalanced, and his tone was a little impatient. It was well known that Li Honghe was about to die. These days, although Li Honghe did not go to the hospital, many medical families in Zhongzhou State had sent elites to Lonely Mountain to express their feelings. In addition, the people of the Nailan family were still helpless about Li Honghe's current situation, which was enough to explain the problem. Gu Qianchuan paid attention to Li Guangtu instead of Li Honghe. This man was now the biggest time bomb in Kunlun City. Li Guangtu didn't say anything. Gu Xingyun said lightly. Gu Qianchuan clenched his fists and wanted to lose his temper, but he finally endured it. However, his face was extremely gloomy, and his tone became cold. Of course, he didn't say anything. He is now on Lonely Mountain. Even if he wants to say something, who can he say it to? So far, he hasn't seen any of the higher-ups. His tone was suppressed to the extreme. Finally, he could not bear it anymore. He slammed the table and stood up. Is the Zhongzhou Parliament a bunch of cowards? Useless trash. Li Guangtu was a traitor, and now he was in Zhongzhou State. Why didn't they arrest him? Why didn't you kill him? Gu Xingyun looked at him, as if she was looking at an idiot. Capture Li Guangtu and kill him? Even if Li Guangtu really committed treason, Li Honghe was still alive. Zhongzhou State would not kill Li Guangtu at will. Now Li Honghe was about to die, but Li Tianlan was invincible after sweeping Beihai. Compared with Li Honghe's old age, Li Tianlan was only 22 years old. His deterrence was even stronger than Li Honghe's. In the face of this situation, how could Zhongzhou State not worry? Li Tianlan. Li Guangtu Gu Xingyin looked thoughtful. I hope Li Honghe can die directly. It would be best if he doesn't wake up. Gu Xingyin suddenly said. What do you mean? Gu Qianchuan frowned. Li Tianlan and Li Guangtu are not of the same mind. Gu Xingyin's voice was calm. In the face of external pressure, they may cooperate. But when there is no pressure, their positions must be different. The Li family has been declining for too many years. The purgatory of heaven capital is not the Li family's nirvana rebirth. It is just a force that was developed outside. This force is now somewhat out of touch with the Li family, so some people will support Li Guangtu, and some will support Li Tianlan. Such a contradiction is almost irreconcilable. Are you sure? Gu Qianchuan hesitated. Think about Mormons at the last moment. Gu Xingyin said calmly, the Samsara Palace is a force that fully supports Li Tianlan. In the last strangulation, they showed no mercy to the purgatory of heaven capital. Instead, some people in the purgatory of heaven capital joined the Samsara Palace's camp in the chaos, which is enough to explain the problem. The master of Samsara Palace is a terrible woman. She treats the purgatory of heaven capital like this, which means that she has confirmed that the contradiction between Li Tianlan and Li Guangtu is irreconcilable. Otherwise, the Samsara Palace will not be so cruel to the purgatory of heaven capital. Such a contradiction will break out sooner or later. If Li Honghe dies in a coma, the cracks inside the Li family will be more obvious, and the contradiction between Li Tianlan and Li Guangtu will break out faster. Gu Qianchuan's eyes gradually brightened. You mean that Li Guangtu and Li Tianlan will be too busy to take care of Kunlun City for the time being, because they are eager to take over the Li family? This is the most likely thing. Gu Xingyin's voice became calmer. What do you think Kunlun City is in the eyes of the Li family? Gu Qianchuan was stunned and said without hesitation, of course it's an enemy. Enemy? Gu Xingyin twitched the corner of his mouth with some mockery and self-mockery. That's the position of the Li family in our eyes. As for us, now in the eyes of Li Tianlan and Li Guangtu, we may also be enemies but more for interests. Li Tianlan is insufferably arrogant and supercilious. With his current strength, give him time, and the whole dark world will be his in the future. Now Kunlun City is not a big threat in his eyes for the time being, so he can let it go for the time being. As for Li Guangtu has always looked down on me and Kunlun City. He won't talk about the treason case for the time being. It's not necessarily good for him to talk about it now. Kunlun City is now the special warfare center of Zhongzhou State, and it can't be brought down by Li Guangtu's words. Besides, there will be no evidence for what he said. We actually have a lot of room for maneuver. But once he says these things, it means that he wants to return to Zhongzhou State, and the purgatory of heaven capital will become very embarrassed in East Island. If I were Li Guangtu at this time, I would choose to put Kunlun City aside. The best choice is not to mention the past, and not to express my position for the time being. He is seriously injured. During the period of time before he recovers, the best way is to do nothing. When he recovers and establishes a connection with the purgatory of heaven capital, whether he really declares Zhongzhou State, violently conquers East Island, or competes with Li Tianlan for the Li family, it will be easier than now. After Li Honghe's death, the Li family has two leaders. In this case, the internal situation is unstable, so they won't rush to deal with Kunlun City. To resist foreign aggression, they must first stabilize the internal situation. When the internal situation is stable, they will deal with Kunlun City. All the interests of Kunlun City will belong to one person, and there will be no variables. Gu Qianchuan was stunned for a while. So in the current situation, we are safe for the time being? He asked. Yes. Gu Xingyin nodded and said, both Li Guangtu and Li Tianlan want to defeat each other and swallow us alone. Now we are extremely safe. Gu Qianchuan's face turned red. This conclusion was shameful no matter how he heard it. He forced himself to calm down. Thinking of the purgatory of heaven capital and Emperor Dong's palace, he frowned tighter and tighter. Li Guangtu, is there a chance to win now? Li Guangtu was seriously injured. Inside the purgatory of heaven capital, as some people walked into the Samsara Palace's camp, the internal division would become bigger and bigger. Now they were still in East Island. Even if Li Guangtu did not express his position, Jifeng Sword Reigning School and Wuji Palace would not be idle. During this time, they would definitely target the purgatory of heaven capital crazily. At this time Li Guangtu, who was seriously injured, was held in Li Tianlan's hands. What about Li Tianlan? The 13th story building was now truly invincible in the world. Li Tianlan swept across Beihai and shone brightly. The remaining forces of the Samsara Palace supported Li Tianlan. The situation in Tiannan gradually became clear. The 5 Eastern European countries continuously sent benefits to Li Tianlan. In Mount Dibing, he could retreat, which also showed that the Wang family of Beihai had promised him something. Inside Zhongzhou State, Li Tianlan had the full support of the giant group, and his own force was also growing rapidly. What was Li Guangtu's chance to win? At present, Li Guangtu is bound to lose. Gu Xingyun said. Gu Qianchuan stared into Gu Xingyun's eyes. Gu Xingyun did not avoid anything and continued, so I'm going to help him. Shall we join forces with the Wang family of Beihai again? Gu Qianchuan asked. No need. Gu Xingyun shook his head. It's useless. The Wang family of Beihai is not what it used to be. It's impossible for them to join forces with us. How are you going to help him? Gu Qianchuan asked. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that something was wrong. Gu Xingyun's current thinking was too clear, which was absolutely rational. This showed that he had already seen the current situation of the outside world. But since he was awakened from a coma, he did not mention his next hibernation at all. If he was not worried about the current Li family, why didn't he seize the time to heal? Such a Gu Xingyun clearly gave Gu Qianchuan a feeling that he seemed to be waiting for something. What do you think? Gu Qianchuan asked very seriously. The phone suddenly rang. Gu Xingyun's eyes suddenly condensed. At the same time, Tiannan. In a small city guarded by the rebels of Annan State, an old-fashioned train, which was not common in Zhongzhou State, slowly entered the station with the roar of the whistle. The station, which barely maintained the old order, was crowded with people. Getting on and off the train was a scene that happened at the station every day, every month, every day. The turbulent flow of people gathered and dispersed. Different people left the station and set off in different directions. A black man dressed casually walked out of the crowd, but he did not go far from the station. He walked through the somewhat dilapidated station, turned around, and finally stopped in front of a shabby van. 2 men who were playing poker in front of the van stood up and stared at the black man with vigilance. The black man's expression was relaxed. He suddenly smiled, revealing a row of white teeth. He pulled the collar of his wide casual t-shirt, revealing a Black Shield logo, and said in Annan language, I'm Black Wolf. 3 hours later, my soldiers will gather at the appointed place. The 2 Annan men in casual clothes breathed a sigh of relief, nodded, and opened the door. The black man got in. The Annan national anthem was played in a low voice in the shabby van. In the inconspicuous corner of the roof, the flag of Annan State was crossed with the flag of the rebels. A short man in his 50s sat in the last row of the van and smoked quietly. In the smoke, he squinted at the black man who got on the van and said hoarsely, How many people do you bring? 200. The black man grinned and stretched out 2 fingers with a smile. All of them are elites. At the same time, similar scenes were playing out in different corners of different cities. Without anyone noticing, in every corner of Tiannan, one after another, secret armed forces began to gather in the direction of the Annan rebel army. It was not the Annan Freedom Corps pretending to be rebels. It was the real rebel army first announced by the Annan military more than 3 years ago. Yuzhou. In a hotel near Prince Yang's mansion, in the silent environment, a photo was passed around in several people's hands. In the photo was a woman who was clean, clear, and quiet. The target is temporarily in a coma and has no ability to fight back. In the hoarse voice, a man covered in a black robe said lightly, "Number 3, Number 5, Number 7, investigate the terrain inside the hospital tonight. Be ready to act at any time." Eastern Europe. Reki City. In the narrow apartment, Prime Minister Riker was giving a passionate speech. After the chaos in Eastern Europe, Riker, who was shrouded in Zhongzhou state, told the best new tomorrow of Wulan state in high spirits. "This is our goal." In the cold voice, a thick finger pointed at Prime Minister Riker and said lightly, "Make a battle plan. We can only succeed. We can't fail." Tiannan Yuzhou Reki City. Under the calm general trend, the undercurrent was constantly rolling. One communication message after another was sent out from these places, and finally gathered in the hands of the same person. In Kunlun City, Gu Qianchuan looked at Gu Xingyun's face. His face was still deathly pale and gloomy, but at this moment, the expression hidden behind the frailty clearly had an unfathomable feeling. Li Tianlan is not easy to deal with now. Gu Qianchuan took a deep breath and said seriously, "And we can't help Li Guangtu now." He paused. Although he didn't want to admit it, he still told the truth. Kunlun City can't give Li Guangtu a bargaining chip to fight against Li Tianlan at present. After all, Kunlun City had been established for a short time, and its foundation was limited. After the two invincible realm experts, Gu Xingyun and Gu Qianchuan, were seriously injured, it immediately looked extremely weak. How could such a Kunlun City help Li Guangtu? "You're right." Gu Xingyun looked down at his mobile phone. "So I'm not going to give Li Guangtu anything, and I can't. Then how can we help Li Guangtu?" Gu Qianchuan asked. "There are many ways to help." Gu Xingyun smiled and said in a cold voice, "We can't strengthen Li Guangtu, but we can weaken the power in Li Tianlan's hands." "Isn't that helping?" He put down his mobile phone and whispered, "It will be very lively next." Chapter 681. When summer solstice, who hadn't slept all night, walked out of the simple palace that had just been built, she saw Lin Fengting sitting in a daze not far away. Lin Fengting didn't leave Mount Dibbing. Now Mount Dibbing was severely damaged, and there was no traditional reception area. Lin Fengting found a place to settle down. When she saw him again, Summer Solstice suddenly realized that she had been busy dealing with the internal affairs of Beihai these days, and neglected Lin Fengting. Lin Fengting didn't bother her. Not only did he not, but he seemed to have disappeared from Mount Dibbing since he left Beihai. Until today, Summer Solstice saw him again. The place he was sitting on was originally a rockery, but it was cut into a boulder by the messy sword intent. In front of the boulder was a pool. The flowers and plants that were cut into pieces were still floating in the water. It was drizzling, and the rain beat on Mount Dibbing. Lin Fengting's figure was sitting in the rain, motionless. It seemed that he had been sitting there all night. Summer Solstice walked over and stood beside him without saying anything. She suddenly found that she didn't know what to say. The friendship of many years ago seemed to have become thinner and thinner with the constant turbulence of the general trend and wind and rain. They used to be very good friends, but at this time, they couldn't find a common topic that belonged to them. Summer Solstice was silent for a long time, and then whispered, "Have you heard about Senior Li's body?" "I haven't got the latest information yet." Lin Fengting looked at the lotus cut by the sword intent in the pool and shook his head. "There is no way," Summer Solstice said. "I just talked to Qingyu on the phone, and the conclusion is still the same. There is no hope. Now they are trying their best to wake Senior Li up temporarily. This is the only thing they can do." Lin Fengting was silent. After a long time, he took a deep breath and whispered, "Senior Li. Senior Li was very good to us when we were young." Summer Solstice's eyes were in a trance. She bit her lip and didn't speak. Li Honghe used to be really good to them. The beauty of the past and the hatred of the present finally became the most complicated feeling in the face of death. At this moment, Summer Solstice really couldn't say anything. "How is Senior Li's situation?" Lin Fengting looked at Summer Solstice and asked. His vitality was completely exhausted, but his desire to live was strong. However, his completely exhausted body suppressed his will, which was the reason why he fell into a coma. Furthermore, an absolutely powerful will is still working hard to maintain his body, which is the reason why he hasn't died yet. Summer Solstice sighed softly. How can a person like Senior Lee really not let go of life and death? Since he refused to leave, there should be some unfinished business, right? So I gave a death order. The people of the Nayland family are all here. No matter what, we must make him wake up temporarily. Lin Fengting's gaze was a little erratic. No one knew what he was thinking. Xia Ji inadvertently saw his eyes and was slightly stunned. At this moment, Lin Fengting gave her a very strange feeling. His trance didn't seem to be because of Li Honghe's imminent death. At this moment, he was obviously thinking of something else. What was he thinking? Summer Solstice was curious. There's no hope? Lin Fengting was in a daze for a while before he asked in a low voice. Summer Solstice was even more curious, but she still shook her head and said, "No." In other words, Lin Fengting's voice was a little bitter. If there's no hope for Senior Lee's condition, then there's even less hope for those who are more serious than him, right? More serious? Summer Solstice was a little stunned. In her knowledge? No, in the knowledge of modern medicine, there was only one condition more serious than Li Honghe's. That was real death. If a person's vitality is completely exhausted and he has no desire to live, Lin Fengting said in a low voice, "Is there any other way?" "There won't be such a person." Summer Solstice looked at Lin Fengting for a long time before she said firmly, "Such a person can only be a dead person." Li Honghe's vitality was completely exhausted. The reason why he didn't die was that his willpower was incredibly tough, so he could barely stay in a coma. The exhaustion of vitality itself was death. If there was no desire to live, how could he live? I'm not making an assumption. Lin Fengting shook his head. If there is such a person and he hasn't died for the time being, is there any way for the Wang family of Beihai? He looked at Summer Solstice with bloodshot eyes. It was not pleading or other emotions, but a kind of exhaustion that went deep into his bones. Summer Solstice only felt a little incredible. She really couldn't think of how a person who had no desire to live and no vitality could live. And what was the form of such a life? No. She shook her head. If there is such a person, even if he barely doesn't die, it should be because of special reasons that he can't hold on for long. The Wang family of Beihai has no practical way for the time being. For the time being. Lin Fengting's eyes suddenly lit up. For the time being. Summer Solstice nodded. Lin Fengting's breathing was a little rapid. There was no practical way for the time being. From another perspective, the Wang family of Beihai now had a theoretical way, but it had not been implemented. What way? He asked straightforwardly. The third generation of eternal life. Summer Solstice said and then smiled bitterly. The third generation of eternal life. Our expected effect is to completely activate the exhausted vitality of the human body, and then fill the human body with vitality. But the research on the third generation of eternal life has lasted for several generations. At present, there are still many technical bottlenecks that have not been broken through, and the situation you mentioned is too special. Even if the third generation of eternal life is really developed successfully, and that person can hold on until then, we still need someone to contact her in person and record her physical data. Lin Fengting was a little hesitant. He rubbed his temples tiredly. After a long time he whispered, "Okay." His voice was a little hesitant, but he finally made up his mind. "I'll inform the family and let Silver Eyes go there." Is there really such a person? Summer Solstice felt more and more incredible. Lin Fengting smiled bitterly and did not speak. But Nayland, she's going to Tiannan. Li Tianlan. Summer Solstice frowned. It doesn't matter. Lin Fengting said calmly, there are people in the Lin clan who take care of the patients. Nayland will go there to see the situation first, and then she can come back. The Lin clan will regularly send her physical data, so that she can master it in the first place. Summer Solstice narrowed her eyes and nodded. I'll inform Nayland later. Have you ever thought? Lin Fengting suddenly whispered. The life and death of the Wang family of Beihai will one day depend on Nayland? He smiled bitterly. Anyway, I've never thought about it. What do you mean? Summer Solstice's eyes suddenly focused. In the next moment, she asked, "Who is the person you said needs treatment?" Lin Fengting shook his head in silence and changed the topic. "Is there anything the Lin clan can help with in the research of the third generation of immortality? Talent, materials, anything?" His tone was indifferent, but extremely firm, with unshakable determination. Li Honghe could not afford to wait for the third generation of immortality. But after all, someone could try and hope for it. "We need ice essence, ice heartgrass, and some other precious medicines now. If the Lin clan is willing to trade, it's the best." Summer Solstice's tone was a little expectant. "Ice essence?" Lin Fengting smiled bitterly. Ice heartgrass was the core medicine for making immortality potion. It grew in an extremely harsh environment. The most important thing was that its output was so low that it made people desperate. It was a priceless thing. Most of these things were concentrated in the Wang family of Beihai. But obviously, in order to overcome the technical bottleneck of the third generation of immortality, the Wang family of Beihai had been out of stock in this respect. There were still a few in the Ice Heartgrass Forest clan. But the Lin clan really did not have ice essence, which was difficult to preserve. Looking for it. At present, only a small amount of ice essence had been found in the polar region. Looking for it deliberately was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Moreover, whether it was the Wang family of Beihai or other countries, they all had professional teams that specialized in collecting these precious medicinal materials. But it was not easy to find ice essence. "Do you have any information?" Lin Fengting suddenly said. "Which forces or countries have ice essence at present? What do you want to do?" Summer Solstice's body shook. At this moment, all she saw in Lin Fengting's eyes was persistence, even madness. She took a deep breath and emphasized, "You are the patriarch of the Lin clan." Lin Fengting's intention of asking this could not be clearer. What did he want to do? He wanted to rob it. "I'm not anymore," Lin Fengting said faintly. "I will leave the Lin clan in the near future, not set up a branch, and be a free man." He smiled and joked, "If you have any nice code name, you can give me one." "Well, how about I call myself Sword Emperor?" Summer Solstice felt a little ridiculous in her heart, but when she heard Lin Fengting's joke, she could not help but glare at him. Lin Yuxian, the first heir of the Lin clan, left the Lin clan's headquarters. Now Lin Fengting, the patriarch of the Lin clan, also wanted to leave the Lin clan's headquarters? "Are you crazy?" Summer Solstice asked incredulously. "I want information." Lin Fengting did not say much. He was very tired. Really tired. Summer Solstice took several deep breaths and said slowly, "It is difficult to perfectly preserve things like ice essence. The Wang family of Beihai is the best at this point. At present, we don't have exact information about several countries that have the ability to preserve ice essence." "Oh," Lin Fengting said thoughtfully. After an unknown period of time, he suddenly asked, "What code name do you think is suitable for me? Sword Emperor? Sword Saint? Sword?" Summer Solstice rolled her eyes. When she was about to speak, Tang Shi, the future hostess of the Wang family of Beihai, suddenly trotted over. Summer Solstice was a little surprised and nervous. "What's wrong, Shi?" Yuetong woke up. Tang Shi said with some excitement. "Yuetong just woke up." Summer Solstice was extremely surprised. Lin Fengting also stood up at the same time. "Let's go and have a look." Chapter 682. Wang Yuetong recovered well. Although Xia Ji had only half of the immortality potion with her, the strong vitality it contained was enough to heal most of the fatal injuries in the shortest time. Under the nourishment of the immortality potion, Wang Yuetong, who had slept for a while, not only recovered, but her physical condition was even better than before the injury. But Song Xiai, who had been taking care of her for the past few days, could see that Wang Yuetong was haggard. This kind of haggard did not originate from the body. Instead, it came from the heart. She saw Wang Yuetong open her eyes. Seeing the confusion on her face after waking up was a normal reaction after being unconscious for a long time. That confusion immediately turned into emptiness. Lifeless, gloomy, and disheartened, she lay on the tidy bed and stared at the ceiling in silence. Her eyes, which had lost their usual vigor, blinked for a long time. It was a true emptiness. There were no emotions or thoughts. When Tang Shi hurried over with Xia Ji and Lin Fengting, Song Xiai was holding Wang Yuetong's hand and saying something. But no matter what she said, Wang Yuetong did not speak, and even the look in her eyes did not change. Aunt. Seeing Xia Ji come in, Song Xiai stood up and shouted helplessly. How is it? Xia Ji's voice was very anxious. No matter how calm she usually was, she was still a mother after all. In the face of her own child, she couldn't not care. He's conscious, but he refuses to speak. Song Xiai sighed softly and said, her worries are too heavy. Summer Solstice was stunned. She walked to the bed and sat down. Looking at the motionless Wang Yuetong, she whispered, Tong. Wang Yuetong did not respond. Xia Ji forced a smile and whispered, are you hungry? Get up, take a shower and change your clothes. I'll personally cook some of your favorite dishes, okay? Wang Yuetong's eyes moved. She blinked her clear but dim eyes, and tears flowed down silently. Xia Ji's smile became more and more reluctant. All the emotions in her heart were blocked. She forced a smile and said, silly girl, you can't talk after sleeping? Yes. Wang Yuetong said softly. Get up and take a bath first, okay? I was in a coma for a few days. I was so dirty. Summer Solstice grabbed her daughter's palm hard and trembled slightly. Sure. Wang Yuetong nodded. Tears were still flowing down her cheeks and fell on her clothes, but her tone was extremely calm, even a little dead. What would you like to eat? I'll do it now. You've just woken up. Can you take it easy? Summer Solstice touched Wang Yuetong's hair. Wang Yuetong didn't dodge and said quietly, either is fine. She slowly sat up and wiped away her tears. She got off the bed and said, I'm going to take a shower. Before he could speak, Lin Fengting coughed and said, I'm going to take a walk outside. Xia Ji nodded and looked at her daughter's back. Wang Yuetong's delicate figure was as light as a feather, without any vitality, just like a walking corpse. Summer Solstice sighed softly and was lost in thought. Auntie, if Yuetong is leaving. Tang Shi suddenly spoke hesitantly. Song Xiai silently poured a glass of water for Summer Solstice, wanting to say something but hesitating. What do you want to say? Summer Solstice looked at her and asked with a smile. Song Xiai was in good physical condition. Now she was nearly 3 months pregnant. She was still slim and exquisite, and she didn't have a strong reaction. But she was pregnant with the grandson of the Wang family of Beihai. No matter how much attention she paid to her, it was not too much. No. Song Xiai shook her head and said, I'm also thinking about this. If Yuetong wants to leave, will Auntie let her go? When Li Tianlan wanted to forcibly take away the injured Wang Yuetong, it was Lin Fengting who stopped him. But he didn't stop him. Lin Fengting just said that Wang Yuetong could temporarily recuperate in Beihai, but he completely respected her choice after she woke up. Summer Solstice had no objection to this. But now that Wang Yuetong had woken up, what should she do next? Summer Solstice was silent for a long time. She stood up and looked out of the window. It was still raining outside. Lin Fengting stood in the rain and looked into the distance. Standing in this place with many good memories for him, his figure looked a little lonely. Summer Solstice thought of the sword that Wang Yuetong stabbed into her own chest. She shook her head and whispered, there is no right or wrong choice. As long as you don't regret it, it's worth it. It was worth it. The door of the bathroom was opened. After washing up, Wang Yuetong blow-dried her hair and changed into a clean off-shoulder dress. Mom. She called out. Sister-in-law. She called out this name twice, to Tang Shi and Song Xiai. During the time of taking a bath, her mood seemed to have completely calmed down, and was no longer in the state of a walking corpse, but she still looked a little depressed. Summer Solstice, who was in deep thought, looked at the time and said, I forgot to cook. I'll go now. No need. Wang Yuetong shook her head, looked at the autumn rain outside the window, and whispered, I want to go out for a walk. She combed her short hair and walked to the door. Put on your clothes. Don't catch a cold. Tang Shi trotted over, took off her little coat, and put it on Wang Yuetong. I'll go with you. I'll take a walk with her. Summer Solstice said. Yuan Songxi, I also have a rest. You've worked hard these days. Tangshi was stunned and nodded. Wang Yuetong let Tangshi put on her coat. She didn't say anything and just walked out quietly. Lin Fengting turned to look at Wang Yuetong and waved his hand with a smile. Wang Yuetong called him uncle and then walked past him. Lin Fengting was a little confused. He looked at Summer Solstice, who was walking behind him, and followed her silently. The storm that swept Beihai had passed. The autumn rain was hazy, beating on the ruins of Mount Dibing bit by bit. Mount Dibing had few hands now, so the reconstruction progress was relatively slow. When the internal security troops came back after the maneuver, it wouldn't take long to restore the past scene. Wang Yuetong walked silently, without any communication with Summer Solstice and Lin Fengting behind her. Along the broken steps, she walked up to the stage of Formidable Person, and saw the silver moon inserted on the stone of Formidable Person. Under the gloomy sky, the slender body of the silver moon sword seemed to still emit a hazy silver light. The heartbreaking sword, like a drop of water, gently trembled on Wang Yuetong's chest, as if responding to the sword intent of the silver moon. Wang Yuetong didn't care about that. She looked at the names carved on the stone of Formidable Person for a long time. Below the stage of Formidable Person were the palaces of the Wang family of Beihai that had stood for hundreds of years, but now became ruins. Most of the ruins had been moved away, but a small number of them were still there. The continuous palaces in the past were gone. A large open space appeared on Mount Dibing, cold and desolate. Wang Yuetong walked along the ruins step by step. Her footprints covered the top of the mountain, but she was always silent. Below the top of the mountain, there were still countless flowers and plants on Mount Dibing. In the hazy autumn rain, the fragrance of flowers lingered, and it was still a magnificent scene. Wang Yuetong walked down the path and past many enemies. She went to the sea of flowers that she liked to go to when she was a child, the pavilion where she used to play hide-and-seek with Wang Shengxiao and Tangshi, and the small lake where she used to be in a daze. The autumn rain fell incessantly. She walked on Mount Dibing for a long time, and her footprints almost covered the entire mountain. The top of the mountain, the mountainside, and the foot. She had been calm, but now she was silent and solemn. She stared at every corner of Mount Dibing and never spoke. Summer Solstice didn't speak either. She watched her daughter walk all the way down the mountain, and seemed to know her daughter's decision, but she never said anything. What is Tianlan doing now? Along the smooth mountain road, when they were about to reach the foot of the mountain, Wang Yuetong suddenly asked softly. Summer Solstice cheered up and said softly, Senior Li's health is failing. It's hard for him to get through this. Li Tianlan is now accompanying him in linen. Calculating the time, it's probably in these 2 days. Wang Yuetong's body stiffened for a moment, and she didn't speak. Summer Solstice took 2 steps forward and said softly, Do you want to go to Linen? If Wang Yuetong wanted to go to Linen, she would not object. At this time, the Wang family of Beihai would go to an important person who was inextricably linked to Li Tianlan. Wang Yuetong would show her goodwill, and also represent the Wang family of Beihai to express sincerity. Wang Yuetong was the most suitable candidate. Even if Wang Yuetong stayed with Li Tianlan in the future and never came back, Summer Solstice did not intend to interfere. Wang Yuetong's sword almost left her life on Mount Dibing. It was not the half of immortality potion that saved her, but Li Tianlan. If this was Wang Yuetong's final choice, Summer Solstice did not intend to stop her. This was her daughter's own choice. As long as it was worth it. Linen? Wang Yuetong was silent for a moment and asked, Why should I go to Linen? Summer Solstice was a little stunned. She seemed to have not expected Wang Yuetong's question at all. She was stunned for a moment and then said softly, Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan. Wang Yuetong laughed. Her voice was pure and without any emotion. He is an enemy of the Wang family of Beihai. He killed so many people on Mount Dibing. Now his relatives are dying. Isn't it a good thing for Beihai? Why should I go? Lin Fengting frowned and took a deep look at Wang Yuetong. He suddenly said, You mean? I have nothing to do with him. Wang Yuetong said quietly. At this moment, she was calmer than ever. The decision she made was also firmer than ever. It didn't matter. He killed so many people on Mount Dibbing. She stabbed him with the sword. In the wind and rain that night, when her long sword stabbed her chest resolutely, everything before had passed. She had already died once that night. What she owed Li Tianlan, she had paid it all. She couldn't pay it off. Wang Yuetong's eyes were a little dazed. She suddenly thought of what he said when they met, and left for the first time. Then I'll owe you. Wang Yuetong smiled. She didn't need Li Tianlan to be responsible for her future life. She didn't need to be responsible for Li Tianlan anymore. Heavenly sons, mediocre people, success or failure. It had nothing to do with her. Lin Fengting frowned tightly. In the face of this unexpected answer, he suddenly did not know what to say. Summer Solstice showed a smile. She smiled with relief. Tong, welcome home. Her voice was soft and fresh. Wang Yuetong did not respond to her. Standing at the foot of Mount Dibbing, she turned her head and stared deeply at the place where she grew up. After a long time she whispered, I'll remember this place. Summer Solstice blinked blankly. But this place has nothing to do with me. Lin Fengting's face changed. Summer Solstice's expression suddenly stiffened. Wang Yuetong shook her head and took 2 steps back, still looking at Mount Dibbing. Her eyes were no longer calm. As her eyes flashed, it was full of that night's saber light, sword shadow and storm. The collapsed ruins, the splashing blood, the scattered corpses, and the dazzling sword light. It was Li Tianlan. It was also the Wang family of Beihai. She didn't know how to face the family that had raised her since she was a child. Just like she didn't know how to face Li Tianlan now. If she couldn't face him, then she would leave. Wang Yuetong gritted her teeth and glanced at Summer Solstice. Mom. She whispered. I'm leaving. She paused and continued. I won't come back. Where are you going? Summer Solstice's face changed dramatically. Wang Yuetong did not answer. She smiled and waved her hand. Then she slowly turned around in the bleak drizzle, and left Mount Dibbing in the drizzle. She was faint, but she had no reluctance to leave. At this moment, she was not Li Tianlan's woman. Nor was she the little princess of the Wang family of Beihai. She was just Wang Yuetong. Just herself. Chapter 683. In his sight, Wang Yuetong's figure was getting farther and farther away. The sky gradually darkened, and the drizzle was slightly chilly. Her calm yet incomparably strong figure became further and further away, more and more indistinct. He went down the mountain and moved forward, until it disappeared. Wang Yuetong did not even look back. Summer Solstice stood there quietly, motionless like a statue. Did you tell her your story? Lin Fengting suddenly asked. Xia Ji was from the Xia clan of the North Sea. Her family used to be an important branch of the Xia clan, but it had long been destroyed. The destruction of the Xia family was directly related to the old patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai. But in the end, Summer Solstice still married Wang Tianzong willingly, regardless of everything. This was a story that many people knew. However, very few people knew the reason behind it, not even Lin Fengting. But from Summer Solstice's standpoint, it was not too much to say that the Wang family of Beihai was Summer Solstice's enemy. Just like Li Tianlan, and the Wang family of Beihai now. If Wang Yuetong had known the story of Summer Solstice, she might have made a different choice. Maybe she would leave the Wang family of Beihai. But even if she returned to Li Tianlan, it would be better than leaving alone aimlessly. Summer Solstice did not answer Lin Fengting's question. In his sight, Wang Yuetong's figure was getting farther and farther away, and finally disappeared completely. Summer Solstice's eyes turned red, and she took out her mobile phone. She watched as her daughter walked further and further away, wanting to forcefully pull her back countless times. She could not be Li Tianlan's daughter. As long as she came back, she would still be the little princess of the Wang family of Beihai. Either way was fine. However, the sword light from that night kept flashing in her mind. The sword light pierced Li Tianlan's chest. It pierced Wang Yuetong's chest. Conflict, despair, helplessness, heart-wrenching. All the emotions seemed to be contained in the sword light. Therefore, Xia Ji did not stop her until she was far away. Because Wang Yuetong left peacefully. There was no reluctance or concern, nor was there any conflict or reluctance. That was true peace. She had completely let go of everything and only had her own freedom. Maybe this is for the best. Summer Solstice said softly, as if she was talking to herself or telling Lin Fengting. She picked up her phone and began to dial, but her eyes were still looking in the direction where Wang Yuetong had disappeared. In that calmness, she could see Wang Yuetong's calmness. She had truly let go of Li Tianlan and the Wang family of Beihai. If this was the ending she chose and believed in, Xia Ji could only choose to bless her, because choices had nothing to do with right or wrong. The call connected. After a moment of silence, Summer Solstice said softly, "Arrange a car to take Yuetong to the airport." The person on the other end of the phone respectfully agreed. "Arrange it for me while you're at it." Lin Fengting said, "I'm going to Linen." It was meaningless for him to stay in the Wang family of Beihai now. If Li Honghe died in the near future, Lin Fengting also wanted to see him for the last time. Xia Ji glanced at him and nodded expressionlessly. "Tomorrow." "What? Are you afraid that I will catch up with Yuetong and control her whereabouts in the future?" Lin Fengting saw through Xia Ji's thoughts at a glance. He touched his nose and smiled bitterly. "You can't deny the possibility, can you?" Summer Solstice asked back. Before Lin Fengting could answer, she had already turned around and walked to the top of the mountain. She said calmly, "That's the best. Beihai won't look for her in the future, and I don't want Li Tianlan to find her either." "Her future?" Summer Solstice paused and whispered. "Will she be very happy?" Lin Fengting did not answer. He could not define happiness, and he could not see the future of Wang Yuetong after she left Mount Dibing, hiding her identity, and looking for an ordinary man who might not love her, but loved her very much for the rest of her life? Finding a job? Simple 9 to 5? Or Lin Fengting thought of many possibilities but finally shook his head. He was not sure whether Wang Yuetong would be happy in the future, but he agreed with Summer Solstice's point of view. Such a result might be the best for her. The Wang family of Beihai would eventually stabilize its position, and Emperor Dong's palace would continue to expand. The seeds of hatred had been planted. A weak woman was sandwiched between two superpowers. She could not bear the weight at all. The huge pressure would completely tear her apart, body and soul. It was best to leave. It was best to let it go. A black car with a broken roof went down the mountain road, past Summer Solstice and Lin Fengting, and finally caught up with Wang Yuetong, who was walking alone in silence. "Little princess." The car stopped beside Wang Yuetong. The driver got off immediately and said respectfully, "Madam asked me to take you to the airport." Wang Yuetong was stunned. The wind and rain with the feeling of autumn fell endlessly. She subconsciously tightened the small coat that belonged to Tang Shi, nodded silently, and sat in the car. The car started slowly and kept moving forward. Wang Yuetong opened the window and looked at the grass and trees outside the window. Haohao Palace, Shenzhou City, Mount Dibing, Beihai Province. Firmament and the sea. She remembered it in her heart. What she needed to remember was the past. It was all over. Wang Yuetong closed the window in her eyes. At the moment when the window was closed, a black Mercedes-Benz passed by Wang Yuetong's car, ran in the opposite direction, and finally went away. From that day on, the little princess of the Wang family of Beihai, who had been surrounded by countless halos, completely disappeared from the vision of the dark world. The car slowly went east. The black Mercedes-Benz went west. The west was the direction of Mount Dibing. In the back seat of the Mercedes-Benz, Wang Shengxiao, who had just returned from Eastern Europe, opened his eyes. It was Firmament who drove him. The elites of the Wang family of Beihai, who had been brought to Eastern Europe by him, and the elites who had been secretly loyal to him, were all left in Eastern Europe by Wang Xiaoyao. Wang Xingxiao had fought for it. But Wang Xiaoyao's attitude was unprecedentedly tough. He let Wang Shengxiao leave Eastern Europe. But he only allowed Wang Shengxiao to take Firmament away. Wang Shengxiao glanced at Firmament and rubbed his forehead. The reason why he let him take Firmament away was not because second uncle didn't want to keep him, but because he felt that he couldn't control Firmament, right? Wang Shengxiao laughed at himself. So Firmament was worthy of his trust? "Young master, Do we need to inform Madam? Firmament glanced at Wang Shengxiao in the rearview mirror and asked. No need. Wang Shengxiao shook his head. It's just going home. There's no need to hold a welcome ceremony. The house is messy enough. He returned to Mount Dibbing without informing anyone. Wang Xiaorao had almost completely fallen out with summer solstice, so naturally he would not inform Mount Dibbing. Firmament nodded. Knowing that Wang Shengxiao was in a bad mood, he did not speak. After going back, you'll have to work hard. I don't have many people around me now, so I'll leave this matter to you. Wang Shengxiao let out a long breath, as if he wanted to spit out the long-accumulated grievances at one time. Try to arrange some better rooms in Beihai Prison. You can tell the prison. Beihai Prison? Firmament's expression changed and became a little unnatural. Beihai Prison was an enemy that was enough to make many big shots in the dark world pale. The desert prison in Zhongzhou State was known as the most heavily guarded prison in the world, but that was not including Beihai. Few people knew the existence of Beihai Prison. Strictly speaking, Beihai Prison was the most heavily guarded, expensive, and desperate prison in the world. No matter how cruel the desert prison was, it was still on the surface. And Beihai Prison was built in the deep sea. Except for a few people, no one knew the specific coordinates of Beihai Prison. Even if they knew, there was nothing they could do. The prison was built in the deep sea with a depth of nearly 500 meters, and it never saw the sun all year round. For the prisoners on the opposite side, even if they were at the peak of the invincible realm, they could only wait for death if they were locked up in it. The idea of breaking out of the prison did not exist at all. The North Sea prison was very small, and there were very few prisoners that could be locked up. The entire prison was made of a special metal that was a fusion of a variety of alloys. Even with their incredibly sturdy alloys, they still had to deal with the immense pressure of being several hundred meters deep in the ocean, as well as the constant patrols and firepower from the North Sea Legion's navy. This was the most despairing cage they could possibly be trapped in. Firmament wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. He really wanted to ask Wang Shengxiao who he wanted to put in Beihai Prison. Wang Shengxiao's tone was extremely calm. Wang Shengxiao's voice was extremely calm. Wang Shengxiao's tone was extremely calm. Brother Jiang? Beihai Prison. Firmament's hand that was driving suddenly trembled, and he did not dare to speak. Wang Shengxiao also fell silent. After a long time, he suddenly smiled and said, Before Li Tianlan went up the mountain, Brother Jiang called me. Firmament gave a vague hum, and his voice was a little complicated. He transferred most of his forces and chose to face Li Tianlan alone. It seemed that he wanted to humiliate the Wang family of Beihai, but in fact he wanted to preserve the strength of the Wang family of Beihai and humiliate himself. Wang Shengxiao whispered, At that time, I was naive enough to think that everything could be turned around, but now, he smiled bitterly and said, Maybe at that time, Brother Jiang had already thought about his ending? The 7 major sword-holding families suffered heavy losses. The Wang family of Beihai suffered heavy losses. The front steps of the stage of Formidable Person were broken. The Silver Moon sword was still stuck in the stone of Formidable Person. The actual loss and the mental humiliation. During the days when Li Tianlan left Beihai, all the dissatisfaction of Beihai fell on Dijiang. Within the Wang family of Beihai, the sword-holding families, the wealthy families, and even the ordinary people all cursed. Dijiang's reputation in the Wang family of Beihai instantly fell to the bottom. Especially what Li Tianlan said to him after defeating Dijiang. No one heard those words. But everyone saw that scene. What was the result? Dijiang was still saying that Li Tianlan didn't say anything at that time. The superpowers of Beihai had been suspicious of Dijiang to the peak. Dijiang seemed to have expected such an ending. It was his own request to go to Beihai Prison. It was also Dijiang's request to let Wang Shengxiao come back now. It was the perfect time. Regarding the problem of Dijiang, when summer solstice was still procrastinating, Wang Shengxiao put him in the most desperate Beihai Prison. While quelling the curses, he could also win the full support of these people. Dijiang was the stumbling block for Wang Shengxiao to control the Wang family of Beihai. When the Wang family of Beihai needed Wang Shengxiao, this stumbling block rolled aside in the most straightforward way with countless humiliation, and obstacles to Wang Shengxiao's ascension. Wang Shengxiao's eyes were complicated. He muttered to himself, "It's all my incompetence, young master." Firmament hesitated and called him. "Don't comfort me." Wang Shengxiao smiled. It was a forced smile, but it looked more and more natural at this time. "What I don't need now is comfort." He looked out of the window and murmured, "If I wasn't incompetent, if I had the strength like Li Tianlan, I might have been able to help my father in Eastern Europe. Second uncle wouldn't have been so fierce. Brother Jiang wouldn't have been sent to Beihai prison by myself. If I had the strength like Li Tianlan, all of this might not have happened." Firmament clenched his teeth tightly and remained silent. Wang Shengxiao looked at the rain outside the window and took several deep breaths. Then he whispered, "It will get better." Firmament nodded his head vigorously. The phone suddenly rang. Wang Shengxiao took out his mobile phone and looked at the number. He picked it up with a smile and said hello. "Shengxiao." On the phone, Song Si's voice sounded. "Yuetong left Mount Dibing not long ago. She said she wouldn't come back, but she wouldn't go to Li Tianlan either." Wang Shengxiao suddenly turned back and looked at the black car that had passed by him not long ago. The car had gone far away. There was only wind and rain in his sight. Wang Shengxiao's eyes were complicated. He was silent for a long time before he whispered, "Do you want to go?" Song Si was a little confused. Wang Shengxiao smiled and said softly, "I'll send you away. With our child." Chapter 684. September 21st. It was rainy in Lin'an. The falling rain sprinkled over the surface of the West Lake and soaked Lonely Mountain. On the misty Lonely Mountain, people walked around in a hurry, and the atmosphere was getting more and more solemn. Representatives of medical families from all over Zhongzhou State had gathered together at this time, seriously discussing Li Honghe's condition. Nailan Dongfeng, known as the physician king of Zhongzhou State, sat in the middle of the famous doctors, holding his forehead with one hand. His eyes were complicated, and his face was haggard. More than a dozen doctors, who were well known throughout Zhongzhou State, were still discussing. But the doctors of the Nailan family were completely silent. 2 hours ago, all of Li Honghe's vital signs had fallen to the lowest point. Nailan Qingyu led people to inject medicine into Li Honghe, barely maintaining his completely exhausted vitality. But everyone in the Nailan family knew that there was really no way. Over the past few days, the Nailan family had united with many medical families in Zhongzhou State to try countless methods, but Li Honghe's vitality, which was almost completely exhausted, had been declining little by little. After the physical data of the test 2 hours ago came out, the Nailan family finally gave up despite their unwillingness. More than a dozen other medical families were still discussing eagerly. They were the ones who were unwilling. With the rise of Li Tianlan and Emperor Dong's palace, countless people wanted to have a relationship with Li Tianlan. It was such a good opportunity. If they could save Li Honghe, not to mention the promotion of their reputation, Li Tianlan's casual words could bring them endless benefits. So these medical families were working hard to find a way. The voices of discussion kept going. But as time went by, fewer and fewer people were still speaking. These famous doctors in Zhongzhou State were the most silent. Nailan Dongfeng raised his head and glanced at his peers around him. He sighed and said softly, "Everyone, I can't do anything about Senior Li's illness. If you still have a way, don't be stingy at this time." No one spoke. Everyone's face was extremely gloomy. Nailan Dongfeng waited for a while, nodded and said softly, "Since everyone has reached a consensus," he stood up and said, "I'll inform His Highness Li Tianlan." Still no one spoke. If there was really a way to cure Li Honghe, everyone wanted to announce the news in front of Li Tianlan in person. But now they were announcing Li Honghe's ending. Only a fool would do such a thing. Nailan Dongfeng stood up and walked out of the hut. He originally wanted to find Li Honghe, but when he glanced around he inadvertently saw a wheelchair not far away. In the wheelchair sat a middle-aged man who had been silent for many days. A beautiful woman with an extremely cold and arrogant temperament was carefully squatting beside the wheelchair. Li Guangtu. Nailan Dongfeng hesitated and slowly walked over. Phoenix, who was crouching beside Li Guangtu, stood up and nodded to Nalan Dongfeng. Nalan Dongfeng didn't mind. He forced a smile and said softly, "Your Highness." Li Kuangta grunted lightly, his voice short and indifferent. He looked at the rippling surface of the lake not far away, his face expressionless. It was the 8th day since he came here. Li Kuangtu also stayed here for 8 days. But from the first day he came here, Li Kuangtu never approached Li Honghe's residence, nor did he ask about Li Honghe's condition. He didn't even communicate with anyone. Nalan Dongfeng didn't expect that the relationship between Li Honghe and Li Kuangtu would be so stiff. He just thought that Li Honghe was not good at expressing himself. He coughed and said carefully, "I want to discuss Mr. Li's illness with you." "Go ahead." Li Kuangtu nodded. "Well, we've tried many ways to cure Senior Li's body, but so far, none of them can work as expected. It can even be said to be useless. His expression was a little heavy. "I'm sorry, Your Highness. We really tried our best." "Oh." Nalan Dongfeng was stunned and continued. "But the Nalan family will make a final attempt. We will try our best to wake Senior Li up temporarily." "Okay. But this way will completely consume Senior Li's exhausted vitality, and even damage his will. It may speed up his death." Nalan Dongfeng opened his mouth and couldn't help but ask, "Your Highness, what do you think?" "Whatever." The corner of Nalan Dongfeng's mouth twitched, and he repeated, "It may speed up Senior Li's death." "It doesn't matter." Nalan Dongfeng took a deep breath and looked at Li Kuangtu. Li Kuangtu was quiet, neither sad nor happy. In Nalan Dongfeng's eyes, all this was a little ridiculous. But no matter how ridiculous it was, at least it was an answer. He nodded with a bitter smile, turned around, and went straight to the cabin where Li Honghe was. Li Kuangtu sat quietly motionless. Wisps of almost imperceptible sword qi were roaming around his body. He looked at the lake not far away, and his eyes became calmer. The purgatory of Heaven Capital had appeared in the dark world for more than 3 years. But deity rarely took action. So until today, no one still understood the real unique skill of the purgatory of Heaven Capital, the immortality seal. Even Li Honghe didn't know much about this unique skill that was separated from the 24 moves of sword. Li Kuangtu struggled to survive when he was infinitely close to death. He started from scratch when his foundation was completely ruined, and finally stepped into the peak of the invincible realm again. He broke through the peak of the invincible realm in Eastern Europe. All this depended on the immortality seal. This unique skill might not be as fierce as the pure 24 moves of sword, nor as extreme as the 6 paths of reincarnation. But in terms of reshaping the foundation, it was truly the #1 martial arts in the dark world. He returned from Eastern Europe with serious injuries, and then went to Linen, when he felt the first sword energy in his body. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. Li Kuangtu's heart completely settled down. He firmly believed that he could recover. What he needed now was time. Thus, he spent all his time silently recovering from his injuries. "Your Highness." Phoenix stood behind Li Kuangtu and gently massaged his shoulders. She said softly, "Go and see Senior Li. These days, Senior Li has been in poor health. This time, I'm afraid." She hesitated and didn't say anything. "You've brought this upon yourself." Li Kuangtu shook his head, and his tone was indifferent to the extreme. The sword energy jumped slightly on his body. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Look at that cemetery." That cemetery was now the most conspicuous enemy of Lonely Mountain. Thousands of tombstones looked dead and desolate under the gloomy sky. About 1/3 of the tombstones in that cemetery are fake, Li Kuangtu said slowly, but 2/3 of the tombstones are real. They are the blood of the Li family over the years. Among these people, no one's realm is lower than the peak of the fire-flaming realm. These are the backbone of the Li family in those days. Li Kuangtu said indifferently, "If he hadn't been overcautious and kept the so-called friendship with the Wang family of Beihai, the Li family doesn't have to pay these prices. Everyone thinks that the decline of the Li family is my fault. In fact, the fault started with him. In terms of sin, he is more serious than me." Li Kuangtu took a deep breath and whispered, "He should have died a long time ago." Phoenix looked at him quietly. After a long time she whispered, That's not the whole reason, is it? Li Guangtu held his breath. He was silent for a long time before he said lightly, "Of course not. That was only half of the reason. And the other half was because of Li Tianlan." Li Guangtu thought of Li Honghe's attitude and smiled. He gritted his teeth tightly, and his eyes became more and more indifferent. This was his Li family. The purgatory of heaven capital was also his purgatory of heaven capital. But it was obvious that neither Li Tianlan nor Li Honghe thought so. The simple wooden house was lit with soft lights, dispelling the gloomy light outside. Nailan Qingyu was still carefully examining Li Honghe's body, looking for the last hope. The eldest daughter of the Nailan family had now been clearly identified as the next physician king of the Nailan family, and the heir of the patriarch. In terms of talent, she might not be as good as her sister Nailan Shuriying, but from the moment silver eyes of Beihai entered the laboratory of Mount Dibbing, she was destined not to be a simple doctor, but the top scientific researcher. In this way, the next generation of the Nailan family all fell on Nailan Qingyu. Nailan Qingyu did not disappoint anyone's expectations. This time in Linen, in the meetings of countless famous doctors, some of her views were enough to amaze all her peers. Even the contemporary Dr. King, Nailan Dongfeng, did not overshadow her. At the most pessimistic time, the plan that could temporarily wake Li Honghe up was put forward by her. But in the case where there was still hope, she still made the last effort. But in many cases, efforts couldn't change anything. The wind and rain in Lin, and were getting heavier. Nailan Qingyu, who had been busy, gradually straightened up. Looking at Li Honghe lying on the bed, she was lost in thought. "How is it?" Li Tianlan's voice sounded behind her. He was sitting on a chair against the wall. His eyes were bloodshot, but his body was still straight, and the lines of his face looked extremely cold and hard. Nailan Qingyu turned around and looked at Li Tianlan. There was an apologetic look in those eyes that were more and more stunning. Li Tianlan seemed to know the answer. An answer that could no longer be regarded as a surprise. He nodded silently and fell silent. In the sound of footsteps, Nailan Dongfeng's figure stepped into the room. Li Tianlan turned his head and glanced at him, expressionless. "Your Highness." Nailan Dongfeng shouted helplessly. He really didn't like to play the role of this stunning beauty. But this matter was too sensitive. It seemed that only the result given by his identity was the most authoritative. "Speak," Li Tianlan said calmly. Nailan Dongfeng's heart sank. This tone suddenly reminded him of Li Guangtu. Could Li Tianlan be so Buddhist? "I'm sorry about Senior Li's current situation, but there's nothing we can do." Carefully, Nailan Dongfeng watched Li Tianlan's expression and said softly. Li Tianlan nodded slowly and said faintly, "I'll find someone to send you down the mountain." He paused for a moment, then said emotionlessly, "You've worked hard." Nailan Dongfeng was stunned, as if he didn't expect Li Tianlan to be so straightforward. Then he smiled bitterly. "Well, although we can't make Senior Li recover, we can make him wake up temporarily." Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. "What's the consequence?" Nailan Dongfeng hesitated and said softly, "This will speed up Senior Li's death, but it's not a problem with the medicine we used. But Senior Li's current body can't support him to wake up for a long time. At most about an hour." Li Tianlan's heart suddenly fell to the bottom. An hour. This also meant that in this life, he only had an hour to spend with his grandfather. Scenes of the past emerged in his mind. Li Tianlan clenched his teeth and controlled his emotions. His body trembled a little. What if I don't wake him up? He took several deep breaths, but his voice still fluctuated violently. One day. Nailan Dongfeng was silent for a while and then said dryly, "One day at most, and I personally think it's better to let Senior Li wake up than to let him sleep for a day." "One day," Li Tianlan murmured to himself. In the sight of Nailan Dongfeng and his daughter, Li Tianlan, who had been sitting straight, seemed to be weak in an instant. His sitting posture was still standard, but his spirit instantly slipped to the bottom. "This chapter is not over, please turn the page." Nailan Dongfeng hesitated and couldn't help but say, "Your Highness, if you let Senior Li wake up, you have to make a decision as soon as possible. Now, time is of the essence." Li Tianlan was silent for a long time. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour. Li Tianlan said nothing. Nalan Dongfeng gritted his teeth, glanced at his daughter, and said in a deep voice, "Let Senior Li wake up." Li Tianlan still didn't speak. Nalan Qingyu looked at her father in surprise, hesitated, and finally called, "Your Highness?" Li Tianlan took a deep breath and nodded slowly. Without hesitation, Nalan Qingyu took out a syringe filled with red liquid from the toolbox beside her, and silently injected the liquid into Li Honghe's arm. Li Tianlan stood up shakily, walked to the bedside, and held Li Honghe's hand tightly. Nalan Dongfeng couldn't bear to see this scene, so he waved his hand and walked out with Nalan Qingyu. Li Tianlan slowly knelt down in front of Li Honghe's bed, holding his hand. It was a long, long time. In the almost frozen atmosphere, Li Honghe's eyes moved, and he opened them very slowly. Blankness and doubt quickly disappeared from his eyes. He saw Li Tianlan. "Grandpa!" Li Tianlan called softly. His voice was very light and calm, but it sounded a little pitiful. Li Honghe's eyes lit up. The corners of his mouth rose, and he laughed softly. Li Tianlan, who had been holding back, couldn't help it anymore. His expression began to twitch from the corners of his mouth, and his face was completely distorted. Tears fell in an instant. "Grandpa!" He called again in an extremely hoarse voice. It was hoarse, empty, and heart-wrenching. No one liked to cry, because it didn't look good. But at this moment, Li Tianlan, who had held on for too long, was really a little fragile and helpless. "Grandpa!" His body trembled, and he lowered his head heartbroken. Li Honghe was still laughing. His last vitality supported him, making him look more and more energetic. "Don't cry." The old and relaxed palm patted the back of Li Tianlan's hand, and Li Honghe's voice was extremely stable. "This day will come sooner or later," he said with a smile, and was extremely open-minded. "It's not too early or too late for me to leave now. At least I can see the future of the Li family." Li Tianlan raised his head, wiped his tears and snot randomly, took a deep breath, and said in a trembling voice, "Grandpa, Li Guangtu is also here. He's outside. I'll call him in right away." He wanted to get up, but Li Honghe held his palm. He looked at Li Tianlan with a smile, his eyes kind and gentle, revealing satisfaction and pride. "Don't call him." Li Honghe shook his head and sat up. "Let's go out for a walk." "Grandpa." Li Honghe's expression changed, and he subconsciously reached out to help him. "I'm fine." Li Honghe waved his hand, and his movement was extremely powerful. "I'm in good condition now." He pushed Li Tianlan's hand away, got out of bed, put on his shoes, and said with a smile, "Many people will have this state before they die. It's called the final radiance of the setting sun. Today I know that it's true." He stood up straight, stretched, and said with a smile, "It feels good." His last vitality slowly disappeared, and his eyes became dimmer and deeper, but the majestic sword intent still supported his body. He stood in front of Li Tianlan, tidied his clothes for him, and asked, "Who else is here?" "Old Master Dongqing is here," Li Tianlan said. Dongqing Hanguang was the most important one. As for the other giants, they would not appear at this time. "Cold light," Li Honghe smiled and said, "It's pretty good. Let's go and meet an old friend with me." Li Tianlan nodded. "Pay attention to your image." Li Honghe wiped Li Tianlan's face and smiled with relief. "You are also a highness now." Li Tianlan forced a smile. A tiny flame flickered on him for a moment. All the tear stains were completely evaporated. However, his eyes were still bloodshot and red. Li Honghe stopped talking, took Li Tianlan, and walked out of the hut. There were no more people outside the hut. Doctors from all over the country, the elites of the Li family, Zhou Yuanshan, Dongqing Hanguang, Qin Weibai, everyone saw Li Honghe. The top of the mountain was quiet for a moment. The wind and rain fell on Li Honghe. Li Honghe still smiled. "Senior Li." In the brief silence, no one knew who shouted first. Li Honghe took Li Tianlan's hand, nodded with a smile, and looked energetic. Not far away, Li Guangtu, who had been staring at the lake, was stiff. Finally, he slowly turned his wheelchair and looked at Li Honghe, who was smiling, with a complicated look in his eyes. Li Honghe also saw him. "Li Honghe, who didn't intend to say anything to Li Guangtu, hesitated and finally walked over with Li Tianlan. Phoenix took 2 steps back and bowed slightly to Li Honghe. Li Guangtu didn't move, watching his father getting closer and closer. Li Honghe stopped. The two of them were less than 5 meters apart, looking at each other quietly, separated by the autumn rain. Li Honghe was still smiling. The two, who used to be kind and filial but eventually turned against each other, looked at each other for a long time. Li Honghe finally broke the silence with a smile. He looked at Li Guangtu and said with a faint smile, "I'm leaving." Between father and son. In the face of life and death. Looking at his father, Li Guangtu nodded expressionlessly, and said the last words to Li Honghe in his life. "Goodbye." Li Honghe said faintly, took Li Tianlan and turned to leave. End of this chapter. Bookmark for easier reading. Chapter 685. There was no confrontation, no quarrel, no memory. At the border of life and death, the father and son looked at each other for the last time. This was their final farewell. Faint like the autumn wind. Li Tianlan no longer looked at Li Guangtu. He held Li Honghe and walked aside. The hazy rain seemed to cut every inch of space in Lonely Mountain. Li Guangtu sat in the wheelchair and looked at Li Honghe's back motionlessly. The father and son, who had parted ways many years ago due to differing ideologies, had quarreled countless times over the years, until today. Farewell. The old man was about to enter heaven, and he had long since entered hell. Were there any grudges between them? Li Guangtu did not know. None of this mattered anymore. He looked at Li Honghe's back. The figure, who had been extremely tall and resolute in his life, had become as thin as a stick, stooped and weak. Li Guangtu's eyes flickered, and his eyes were full of the past. Everything seemed to have come to an end today. Goodbye. Never again. Li Guangtu took a deep breath and remained silent for a long time before saying, "Let daybreak come." Phoenix, who was standing beside him, nodded and said softly, "All right." Li Honghe's pace was steady, and his breathing was steady. His condition seemed to be getting better. At the last moment of his life, his smile never stopped. He smiled and greeted everyone who passed by, and finally sat on a bluestone on the edge of Lonely Mountain. "Do you remember this place?" Li Honghe gasped and asked with a smile. Li Tianlan stood beside Li Honghe and nodded silently. Wang Tianzong and Gu Xingyun once joined forces to attack Lonely Mountain. Compared with 3 years ago, Lonely Mountain was actually not the same mountain, but it was the same place after all. The newly built Lonely Mountain still retained this huge bluestone, which was one of the few things that did not turn into powder under Wang Tianzong's sword energy. Li Tianlan remembered this place, this position, and this bluestone facing the West Lake. More than 3 years ago on this bluestone, he carried the dragon vein and stood beside Great Master Wu Wei, quietly watching the metaphysics grandmaster of Zhongzhou State turn into a wisp of smoke with the wind. It was like a reincarnation. 3 years ago he saw Great Master Wu Wei off here. Now he was going to send his grandfather off here. This is the Wu Wei path's enemy. Li Honghe whispered, "Not bad." Li Tianlan did not speak. Li Honghe sat on the bluestone, facing the wind and rain, looking at the rippling West Lake in the rain in front of him, and said lightly, "Do you have anything to ask me?" Li Tianlan looked at Li Honghe. His essence, qi, and spirit became more and more vigorous, but his entire person seemed to become older. When he spoke, he did not look at Li Tianlan, but only at West Lake. Li Tianlan stood in front of him, and he could vaguely see the hesitation and guilt in his eyes. "No." Li Tianlan suddenly smiled. "No." Li Honghe also laughed. "You know the truth of the purgatory of heaven capital. You know Li Guangtu. You know that he is not your father. Do you really have nothing to ask me? For example, who Dongqing Huangtu is, your background, your parents, and many other things. Don't you want me to explain them to you?" Dongqing Huangtu. It was the first time Li Tianlan had heard this name from someone other than Qin Weibai. Li Tianlan was silent for a long time. Li Honghe's eyes were in a trance. With Li Tianlan's silence, he became a little nervous and helpless. "No." Li Tianlan finally shook his head, very calmly, very slowly, and very resolutely. Why not? Li Honghe looked at Li Tianlan, his eyes fluctuating. Is none of this important to you? It's very important. Li Tianlan looked at the old man with a smile and whispered, but it's not as important as you. He didn't know how much of the past that the Li family could not let go of was hidden in his background. It might be difficult to talk about it, or it might be involuntary, or something else. These were all important. But more importantly, Li Tianlan felt Li Honghe's guilt, nervousness, and uneasiness. Li Tianlan suddenly didn't want to know the so-called truth, at least not now. In Li Honghe's last time, he just wanted him to go with peace of mind. The most important thing is that you are my grandfather. Li Tianlan whispered, that's enough. Ha! Li Honghe's eyes fluctuated violently. He opened his mouth, but for a moment he couldn't say anything. Grandpa, you don't owe me anything. Li Tianlan also sat down on the blue stone and looked into the distance. Maybe I owed you at the beginning, but over the years, you've already made up for what should be made up for. The Li family doesn't owe me anything. You and the Li family have given me everything you can, which is worthy of what I've suffered. He looked into Li Honghe's eyes and whispered, so if you really want to leave today, please rest assured that the Li family will have me in the future. No matter what, you are my grandfather, the best grandfather. So when you get up there, take a good look. The Li family I've given you, the best Li family. Li Honghe held Li Tianlan's hand tightly. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. His arm trembled slightly because of the effort. Looking at Li Tianlan, he opened his mouth several times, but finally smiled, nodded and said, okay. Tell me what happened to you in Beihai. Li Honghe whispered. I want to hear it. Li Tianlan was silent for a moment and shook his head. There's nothing to say. I've done what I should do, and I've got what I should get. He paused, thought of the bleak sword light, and muttered to himself, I've lost what I should lose. He raised his palm, and the sword light bloomed quietly. The 13th floor appeared beside Li Tianlan. Famous swords appeared in Li Honghe's eyes one after another, all of which he was most familiar with. Autumn water, colored glass, star dome, amber. Except for the broken world and tide, all the famous swords of the Wang family of Beihai were in the 13th floor at this time. There were only 3 famous swords that really belonged to the sword formation of the 13th floor. Xianyuan sword, aquamarine sword, and twilight sword. The 3 delicate small swords rotated slightly around Li Tianlan, dexterous and docile. Li Honghe watched this scene quietly and whispered, Heh? Human Emperor. He shook his head. This incredible sword formation has never been seen before. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and looked at Xianyuan's sword. Is it really the human emperor? Yes and no. Li Honghe shook his head. It can be regarded as the human emperor, or not. But it has nothing to do with the human emperor of the Wang family of Beihai, at least not now. Such a sword formation, such a sword. Li Honghe was silent for a moment and whispered, this can no longer be regarded as simple swordsmanship and martial arts. The combination of the peak sword intent, the strongest fate, the perfect materials, the strong killing intent, and countless conditions leads to such a sword formation. It has life, thoughts, and emotions. He looked at Li Tianlan and sighed. You left the other swords in Beihai. I think you discovered the secret of this sword formation. So you want to use those swords to absorb the fate of the Wang family of Beihai? Li Tianlan did not answer. Li Honghe seemed to want to say something more, but in the end he did not. He turned his head and looked around. Not far away, Qin Weibai, who was dressed in plain clothes but still looked like a beautiful scenery, stood there and looked at Li Tianlan tenderly. Li Honghe suddenly smiled and waved at Qin Weibai. Qin Weibai hesitated and walked over slowly. She looked at Li Honghe with calm eyes. Thank you. Li Honghe looked at the most incredible woman he had ever seen. He smiled and thanked her. If there were no Samsara palace, maybe Li Tianlan would still be silently enduring, waiting for the opportunity to develop. For 10 years, 20 years, or even his whole life, he would aim to restore the glory of the Li family. But now it was completely different. He could see Li Tianlan's future, and the Li family's future. He could leave with peace of mind. This thank you was from the bottom of his heart. Qin Weibai shook her head and said calmly, I don't deserve it. Li Honghe took a deep look at Qin Weibai and shook his head. It's the same. At least it's the same for me. Qin Weibai suddenly looked up at Li Honghe, seeming a little surprised. I have a question, Li Honghe suddenly said. I'm just curious. I have no other thoughts. Before I leave, I just want to figure out whether you killed a man named Huawu more than 3 years ago. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. At this time, the person Li Honghe cared about couldn't be a simple person. So in the next second he and Qin Weibai asked together, who is Huawu? Li Honghe froze for a moment and looked at Qin Weibai. Qin Weibai was a little confused. She seemed to think of something, and a strange look flashed in her eyes. The celestial emperor of Huawu? Li Honghe narrowed his eyes and thought about it. He turned his head and glanced in the direction of Li Guangtu, whispering, I see. Qin Weibai didn't speak. It's all right. Li Honghe suddenly smiled and held Li Tianlan's hand, whispering, I always think Tianlan is the best. And the strongest. Of course. Qin Weibai nodded seriously. Li Honghe coughed and looked over Qin Weibai. Less than 20 meters behind them, the few veterans of the Li family, Dongcheng Hanguang, Zhou Yuanshan, and others gathered together. Li Honghe nodded to them. Dongcheng Hanguang hesitated and walked over slowly. Everyone followed him. Li Honghe's eyes fell on the veterans of the Li family, and his eyes were soft. His breathing gradually became rapid, and his good state began to become weary. The Li family. Without any nonsense, he whispered. The future of the Li family depends on Tianlan. I hope you can help him more. This was undoubtedly the most important last words, representing the will of the Li family's inheritance. Several veterans of the Li family nodded. They were mentally prepared, but when the moment really came and they saw that Li Honghe was about to leave, great sadness still surged out. It was not an emotional breakdown but a kind of powerless numbness. Everyone has times when they can't do anything. Li Honghe gasped a few times and said with a low laugh, This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. People say that I'm good at making arrangements, but personal ideas can't reverse the general trend. I've done a lot of wrong things in my life, but I have to do a lot of things even though I know they're wrong. He grasped Li Tianlan's palm tightly. Over the years, the Li family has not been safe, and there are crises everywhere. The collapse of the Li family was so sudden that I had no time to prepare a way out. So when the Li family collapsed, I could only take you with me. Over the years you have proved your loyalty to the Li family. You are the greatest pride of the Li family, and the most feared power of the enemy. But there are too many, really too many. The scale of more than 1,000 people, more than 1,000 people. A large number of high-end combat forces. There is no way for us to survive if we all gather together. So you've all seen what I've done. People die every year. Some people really die, and some people leave Zhongzhou state in the name of death. This is the predecessor of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital. I actually didn't want to establish the Purgatory of Heaven Capital, or I didn't find a suitable helmsman for the Purgatory of Heaven Capital. Li Guangtu was too ambitious and his character was too extreme. He was not the most suitable candidate. No, he was not even a qualified candidate. But at that time, he was the only choice. I knew at that time that once he and the Purgatory of Heaven Capital grew up, there would definitely be today's situation, but I had no choice. Many of you have joined the Purgatory of Heaven Capital. They are all your old friends and Tianlan's elders. If I still have time, in the next few years, my biggest goal is to take the Purgatory of Heaven Capital back from Li Guangtu and give it to Tianlan. Li Guangtu's eyes gradually lost focus, and everything in his sight began to distort and become blurred. What a pity! There was regret in his voice. I have time to make arrangements, but I don't have time to take it all back. The establishment of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital can barely be said to preserve the core strength of the Li family. So, I beg you to carry out my last order. In any case, don't let the Purgatory of Heaven Capital fall into the hands of Li Guangtu. The future of the Li family belongs to Tianlan, and only Tianlan. Li Honghe smiled bitterly. I can't do anything, so please. Senior Li, don't worry. A veteran of the Li family stood up and said in a deep voice, "We will do our best to help young master, and at the same time contact those old guys in the purgatory of heaven capital." Li Honghe grunted, turned his head with difficulty, and looked at Dongcheng Hongguang. He wanted to say something, but there was really no time. He looked at Dongcheng Hongguang and smiled helplessly. "I'm sorry." He tried to breathe, feeling that the flame in his body was burning his internal organs. His vitality was burned away, leaving only a tenacious will. Dongcheng Hongguang shook his head and whispered, "Don't talk about this between you and me. Tianlan is very good." Li Honghe murmured, "No, he's the best. But he's still too young. After I leave, keep an eye on him and take care of him for me." "Don't worry," Dongcheng Hongguang said in a deep voice. "The Dongqing clan will do its best to support Tianlan." "Okay." Li Honghe muttered to himself, "Okay." He grabbed Li Tianlan's palm hard and whispered, "Tianlan." Li Tianlan grunted and sat on the blue stone, but he didn't look at Li Honghe. Li Honghe reluctantly pointed in the direction of Dongcheng Hongguang. His voice was weak, but he used all his strength. "Call me Grandpa." Li Tianlan's body shook violently. Dongcheng Hongguang suddenly looked up. Li Honghe's last vitality supported him tenaciously, and he repeated, "Call me Grandpa." At this moment Li Tianlan suddenly panicked. Looking at everyone's eyes, he subconsciously glanced at Qin Weibai. Qin Weibai grabbed Li Tianlan's other palm, looked at Dongcheng Hongguang, and whispered with a smile, "Grandpa." Dongcheng Hongguang froze for a moment, and so did everyone else. "Ah. Okay." Dongcheng Hongguang looked at Qin Weibai and responded in a panic. Li Tianlan's body was a little stiff. "Call me Grandpa," Li Honghe insisted and repeated almost stubbornly. "Grandpa. Grandpa." Li Tianlan took a deep breath, looked at Dongcheng Hongguang, and called him in a very dry voice. Good children, all good children." Dongcheng Hongguang looked at Li Tianlan and then at Qin Weibai, extremely excited, and his voice trembled. Li Honghe's voice stopped. His sight had become dark, but he still looked in the direction of Dongcheng Hongguang. "I won't let you down," he whispered and held Li Tianlan's palm tightly. It was still raining. A gust of autumn wind blew over Lonely Mountain, extremely soft. The last trace of sword intent bloomed on the bluestone. Li Honghe's figure began to break. Flesh, skin, and the whole body. The autumn wind blew over. His old figure was completely blown away. Li Tianlan's palm was slightly lighter. Li Honghe's body disappeared. Completely dissipated. Sorrowful cries rang out on Lonely Mountain. Li Tianlan didn't move. He sat quietly on the bluestone, looking at the rippling lake in front of him, and remained silent for a long time. End of this chapter. Bookmark for easier reading. Chapter 686. September 23rd. Linen. It was raining cats and dogs. Under the secret gaze of the entire Zhongzhou state, and even the entire dark world, the storm that everyone had been waiting for finally swept through the dark world. Li Honghe, the former leader of Zhongzhou state, the leader of the Li family, the closest partner of Beihai province, and the former state-protecting god of war of Zhongzhou state who had guarded Zhongzhou state for 32 years, passed away at the age of 89. The old man, who guarded Zhongzhou state and supported the Li family, seemed to be able to shoulder all the weight, had finally come to the end of his life. He had been glorious, down, and forbearing. He still had regrets in his life, but he died peacefully. On August 21st, the news of Li Honghe's death spread throughout Zhongzhou state and the whole dark world. The noisy dark world seemed to have quietened down. The situation was changing, and the general trend was roaring. In the countless years of inheritance, the Li family had always been recognized as an opponent by all the superpowers, whether in the clouds or in the clouds. Li Honghe was also recognized as an enemy by all the superpowers. Li Honghe died. The rise of Li Tianlan. Alternating, rising and falling. Everyone agreed that this was both the end and the beginning of the Li family. The Sword Emperor was silent, the Sky Blade had fallen, and the God of War had passed away. Purgatory of Heaven Capital, Samsara Palace, Vatican, Kunlun City, Heroes Club, Polar Ground Alliance, Men in Black, Jiang family of South America, one force after another. The high-end combat strength that once stood at the peak of the era was constantly declining. They were either on the verge of death or completely annihilated. The divine and holy lists, which represented the peak of the dark world, were mostly empty. Someone exited the stage. Similarly, someone had just entered the arena. Wei Kunlun of Mount Shu, the king of North Sea Xiaorao, Dijiang. New invincible realm experts began to appear one after another. The previous era was still stubbornly leaving a shadow under the sky, but the new era had clearly revealed its true appearance. Li Honghe's death made more and more people realize that the past era seemed to be about to become a thing of the past. In different places, different people began to gather in Lenin. Noon of the 23rd. Headed by Li Huaxing, all 9 members of the Zhongzhou parliament were present, including Dongqing Wudi, the minister of the army headquarters who had just returned from Beihai. 29 parliamentarians of Zhongzhou State, the ministers of the 4 Secret Service headquarters of Zhongzhou State, the director of the Supervisory Council, and the directors of the Special Operations Bureaus of various provinces also climbed Lonely Mountain one after another. Kunlun City, Mount Shu Sai City, Jade Pool, Azura Path, the Shadow Sect, and the Great Soaring Temple, which had been lingering at the edge of the Dark World, had also sent out important figures. Wang Shengxiao came to Lonely Mountain on behalf of the Wang family of Beihai. Li Beitian, Ning Qiancheng, and the others rushed back from Tiannan. Daybreak entered Zhongzhou State alone on behalf of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. Each theater of operations in Zhongzhou State sent representatives to express their sincerity. Star State, England, France, Germany, Italy, Snow Country, and the Vatican. The Secret Service centers of nearly 20 countries, including the nearby Gaoshan State, Hung State, and Annan State, called Zhongzhou State to express their regret for Li Honghe's death. Even the major dark forces that were in turmoil sent important figures to Lin, and as soon as possible. Given Li Honghe's status, his death was fully qualified to be broadcasted in Zhongzhou State. However, the Special Warfare System had always been an organization in the dark, so the media in Zhongzhou State were silent. But the real standard could be said to be the highest in years. President Li Huaxing of Zhongzhou State personally delivered a eulogy, deeply cherishing Li Honghe's contributions to Zhongzhou State, clearly expressing Zhongzhou State's deep sorrow for losing Li Honghe. At the solemn funeral, under the heavy rain, countless people stood in the heavy rain. From beginning to end, no one left early. There was no farewell ceremony. Li Honghe's body turned into a wisp of breeze on Lonely Mountain with the sword in tent. The coffin prepared by Li Tianlan only contained some of Li Honghe's clothes. The coffin was buried at the highest point of the Li family's cemetery. From beginning to end, Li Guangta did not attend this simple, but extremely grand funeral. Only Li Tianlan. Only he was alone. He refused anyone's help. Carrying the coffin, burying the earth. Everyone looked at him, watching him busy all by himself in silence. That kind of sorrow was so calm. But it also carried a kind of unprecedented determination. Today, the Li family was really only left by himself. In the sense of inheritance, he was the last person of the Li family. But no one thought that such a Li family was down and out. If it were more than 3 years ago, the death of Li Honghe would also have such a scene today. But perhaps just after the funeral, Li Tianlan would also disappear. But now, the old era was over. Wei Kunlun, Wang Xiaoyao Dijiang. The new invincible realm was growing. But under the sky of the new era, Li Tianlan, who had not yet entered the invincible realm, was more brilliant than anyone else. This was his era. Even if he was the only one left in the Li family, this was still the era of the Li family. Even if he was the only one left, the current Li family was still the top wealthy family in Zhongzhou State. It was nearly evening when the funeral officially ended, but most people did not leave Lonely Mountain. By now, no one thought that Li Honghe's death was the beginning of the Li family's demise. On the contrary, the Li family without Li Honghe was more threatening in others' hearts. Li Tianlan's growth was now almost unstoppable. After the end of the chaos in Eastern Europe, he penetrated the entire Beihai province in an almost invincible manner. The whole dark world had begun to take Li Tianlan's rise seriously. Li Honghe's death was a good opportunity for them to get in touch with Li Tianlan. No one intended to leave so easily. Some talked about cooperation. Some tested Li Tianlan's attitude. And some even wanted to join the East Emperor Palace. Everyone had different ideas. In addition to Li Tianlan, there was another person on Lonely Mountain who was also the focus of attention. Li Guangtu, the purgatory of Heaven capital. The Li family had been lurking for 20 years and constantly enriched the strength of the purgatory of Heaven capital. After the final battle of Heaven capital broke out more than 3 years ago, the purgatory of Heaven capital became the master of East Island. After more than 3 years of development, it could be regarded as a very stable superpower. Li Guangtu's identity was sensitive. After it was exposed, the situation of the purgatory of Heaven capital was extremely delicate. Whether to stay in East Island or return to Zhongzhou State, any choice could bring great variables, and variables often meant benefits. So when many people pestered Li Tianlan, there were also some people who wanted to see Li Guangtu and know his attitude in the future. But so far, Li Guangtu had not shown up at all. Not only did he not show up, but the wooden house where he was had been completely blocked. The elites of the Zhongzhou State Shadow Sect had quietly isolated the area where Li Guangtu was, blocking everyone from approaching. At this moment in the gradually dimming sky, President Li Huaqing of Zhongzhou State was sitting opposite Li Guangtu. Beside Li Guangtu was the expressionless phoenix. And Daybreak with an indifferent expression. Beside Li Huaqing sat an old man with white hair and beard. And the representative of Kunlun City, who came to Lonely Mountain. Gu Qianchuan. In the more than 20 years since the treason case, this was the first time that Li Guangtu had formally faced the high-level officials of Zhongzhou State. It was also the first time that he had formally faced Kunlun City. Gu Qianchuan. Li Guangtu. There was no doubt that Li Huaqing wanted to figure out the treason case. This was a face-to-face confrontation. Chapter 687. The atmosphere in the room was dull and depressing. The sky was getting darker and darker. The dim light shone in the shabby room. Everyone's expression seemed to be hidden in the darkness, which looked vague and weird. Phoenix, with a cold expression, poured a glass of water for Li Huaqing and the old man next to him. As for Gu Qianchuan, he was directly ignored. Gu Qianchuan did not respond. Sitting opposite Li Guangtu on behalf of Kunlun City, he lowered his head slightly, narrowed his eyes, and wandered quietly in every corner. "Thank you." Li Huaqing took the glass of water handed by Phoenix, and said with a smile. Phoenix did not respond. No one spoke. The atmosphere in the narrow space became more and more depressing. Li Huaqing bowed his head and drank some water. He looked at Li Guangtu quietly and narrowed his eyes slightly. He was not familiar with Li Guangtu. More than 20 years ago, when Li Guangtu was at his peak, the academics were far less than what they were today. At that time, he was still the deputy speaker of Liaodong, competing with others for the position of governor. With his rank at that time, he could barely be regarded as a person in Li Guangtu's eyes, but that was all. The two had met several times on different occasions, and at most, they were acquaintances who nodded at each other. Therefore, in order to get in touch with Li Guangtu this time, Li Huaqing brought not only Gu Qianchuan, but also a former director of Zhongzhou State. In silence, Li Huaqing turned his head slightly and looked at the old man next to him. The old man's surname was Yang, and his first name was Feng. Perhaps not many people in Zhongzhou State remembered this name now, but more than 20 years ago, he was an iron-fisted figure who was famous in Zhongzhou State. He was a former director of Zhongzhou State's parliament, and the Minister of Supervision of Zhongzhou State at that time. Yang Feng's position at that time could be said to be the strongest supporter of the Southeast Group. Before entering the center of Zhongzhou State, he was the speaker of Jiangxia. Since he could serve as the top leader in the core base camp of the Li family, his position was self-evident. When the Wang family of Beihai and the Li family jointly controlled the Southeast Group, Yang Feng was Li Honghe's most trusted giant. Therefore, after the treason case broke out, even though he knew there was something fishy, Yang Feng still advocated a thorough investigation, supported Li Honghe and the Li family, and even broke with the backbone of the Wang family of Beihai in the Southeast Group. With the collapse of the Li family, there were many senior officials like Yang Feng, but there was only one ending: purge. With the shuffling of the cards again and again, the vast majority of high-ranking officials who were once loyal to the Li family left the stage of power. As a director magnate of the central state, Yang Feng didn't have a good ending, but his early retirement wasn't too bad. Too many things had been covered up by the victor's propaganda over and over again. Yang Feng, this tough and iron-fisted figure, gradually disappeared from the memory of many people. It wasn't until Li Honghe died and the Li family rose that Yang Feng, who had been living the rest of his life in Yuzhou, was invited by Li Huaqing. Yang Feng felt Li Huaqing's gaze and frowned slightly. He hesitated and was just about to speak, when Li Guangtu took the initiative to speak, breaking the oppressive silence. His gaze swept Li Huaqing, and then fell on Yang Feng. He nodded and said in a calm tone, "Uncle Yang, long time no see. How are you?" "Average." Yang Feng shook his head. He came from a military background. Even in his old age, his sitting posture was still ramrod straight. Coupled with his unyielding way of life, most of the time, he exuded a cold aura from the inside out. But at this moment, although he was as cold as before, he had an unconcealable haggardness and looked extremely helpless. No one could specifically explain how much of a blow Li Honghe's death had dealt to Yang Feng. The two had been friends for many years, and it was a true lifelong friendship. At the time, Li Honghe was allowed to take thousands of high-level combatants of the Central State's special warfare system to the border and preserve the last bit of the Li family's foundation. Yang Feng and Wu Zhengmin had made great contributions. Even though he retired early, he used his influence to create a relatively good situation for the Li family. Every time Li Honghe left the camp at the border, he would definitely go to Yuzhou to see Yang Feng. Ordinary people couldn't understand this kind of friendship. When the news of Li Honghe's death spread throughout the central state, Yang Feng seemed to have aged in an instant. Even now, he still had a low fever. It was only because of Li Guangtu that he had to come. "I've been very quiet these years. No one has disturbed me, so I've cultivated my mind." Yang Feng held the cup and drank water. His arms were trembling in the dark. A former director of the central state had been undisturbed after his retirement. This was not a good thing at all. It could only show that he had been excluded from the upper circle by those in power. Li Huaqing coughed, feeling a little embarrassed. "It's the Li family who let you down," Li Guangtu said softly. His eyes were sincere and full of guilt. No matter how extreme his character was, he would respect and feel guilty for the old man who had given everything to the Li family. "He and I both let you down." This he referred to Li Honghe. Yang Feng looked at Li Guangtu with a complicated look in his eyes. What happened back then? In the past 2 decades, the case of treason had been the most sensitive event. Some information required a very high level of authority. The information of the case of treason had now been classified as confidential files. If one wanted to read it, one needed at least the authority of a general in the military or the special warfare system. Yang Feng was a director of the central state at that time, so there was no problem with his authority. But the important thing was that even if he turned over the information, it still could not explain too many problems. The case of treason broke out too quickly and too violently, like a frenzied thunderstorm. After the thunderclap, the whole central state had been turned upside down. In less than 6 hours, nearly 100,000 elites of the central state were almost wiped out. Invincible realm experts were seriously injured, their murderous weapons were broken, and countless thunder-shocking realm experts were killed. Blood flowed like a river. Until today, except for those involved, no one knew the tragic truth. No one knew how tragic the truth was buried in the countless bones and blood. Back then, Li Guangtu thought for a moment, then shook his head and smiled. "It doesn't matter. What's the point of mentioning it now?" "Of course it's meaningful," Li Huaqing said with a smile. He looked at Li Guangtu with sincere and gentle eyes. "In fact, Zhongzhou State has never investigated the case of treason. Even now, it's not settled. At most, it can only be regarded as putting aside the dispute. The Li family has been the pillar of the country for hundreds of years. Personally, I believe in the Li family's loyalty to Zhongzhou state. Even after the case of treason, Senior Li's actions over the years have proved this. So if there's something hidden in the case of treason, you can tell me. I promise in the name of the president of Zhongzhou state that Zhongzhou state will investigate it thoroughly and find out the truth. Tut-tut. Li Guangtu shook his head with a smile and looked at Li Huaqing. His attitude was neither arrogant nor low-key, just plain. And then? Li Huaqing was slightly stunned. This simple rhetorical question contained too many meanings at this time. He thought for a moment and said calmly, "If there's something hidden in the case of treason, when we find out the truth, we'll give everyone an explanation." His words were very neutral. Even from a personal standpoint, he was willing to believe in the loyalty of the Li family, but his current identity was still the president of Zhongzhou state. Li Guangtu did not speak. Li Huaqing knocked on the table in front of him and said calmly, "If it turns out that you didn't commit treason, the parliament of Zhongzhou state is willing to apologize to the Li family and you. We welcome you back to Zhongzhou state." Li Guangtu raised his eyebrows. "Is this the attitude of the parliament?" "For the time being, this is just my attitude," Li Huaqing said calmly. "Guangtu, at least we have to figure out what happened that year, so that we can discuss a suitable solution." Yang Feng took a deep breath and said calmly in a gentle tone. Li Guangtu was silent for a moment, nodded and said flatly, "Ask him." He glanced at Gu Qianchuan, who had been lowering his head, and said with a faint smile, "Why? There's money on the ground to pick up? You're even reluctant to raise your head? I know you. You participated in the siege against me, but your strength was not so good at that time. Oh, I'm sorry, your strength is not so good now." Gu Qianchuan suddenly raised his head and stared at Li Guangtu. Li Guangtu narrowed his eyes, and his expression was cold and almost feminine. Gu Qianchuan gritted his teeth, sneered and did not speak. "Qianchuan, you were also one of the people involved in that year. Why don't you tell me about the situation at that time?" Li Huaqing said calmly. "I can't remember many details because it's been too long." Gu Qianchuan took a deep breath and said expressionlessly, "Tell me about it." Li Huaqing looked at Gu Qianchuan, and his tone was vaguely tough. Gu Qianchuan took a deep breath and said coldly, "More than 20 years ago, shortly after Li Guangtu was the commander of the Border Control Corps, he publicly made radical remarks about the border war at a corps meeting. Led by Annan State, several countries in Southeast Asia expressed their dissatisfaction. When the situation was chaotic, the Border Control Corps decided to carry out a joint maneuver with the Southern Theater of Operations. Many martial arts forces and special warfare organizations of Zhongzhou state were invited. During the maneuver, the Border Control Corps crossed the border of Zhongzhou state and regarded part of the Annan state area as part of the battlefield. Gu Qianchuan paused and glanced at Li Guangtu. But when the maneuver was about to end, Kunlun City found traces of large-scale mobilization of the Annan army. At the same time, we found that Major General Li Pingqing of the Border Control Corps was leaving the territory with the Great Wall Plan of the Border Control Corps. Kunlun City intercepted him at once and reported to Li Guangtu. Li Guangtu sent people to intercept him. At that time, Li Pingqing, who was only at the peak of the fire-flaming realm, led a small number of subordinates and broke through the blockade of several thundershocking realm experts belonging to the Li family. Gu Qianchuan sneered and continued. Nearly an hour after the incident, Senior Colonel Hu Song, the Minister of the Information Department of the Border Control Corps, intercepted the communication signal at that time. At that time, we knew that Li Pingqing's defection was authorized by Li Guangtu. He used his authority to take away a lot of important data of the Great Wall Plan and gave it to Li Pingqing. The call records at that time are still kept in the archives of Zhongzhou state. The evidence is conclusive. Kunlun City thought that Li Guangtu was suspected of treason and reported it to the Parliament of Zhongzhou state immediately. But as a result, Gu Qianchuan said no more. It was clear what the result was. The fiercest battle in Zhongzhou state in recent years broke out on the border. The Li family completely collapsed, and the turmoil continued to this day. Which member of the parliament gave the order? Li Guangtu looked at Gu Qianchuan and asked with a playful look. It was Vice President Chen Wanning. Gu Qianchuan gave the answer without hesitation. Yang Feng sighed. Li Guangtu smiled and said nothing. Chen Wanning, the vice president more than 20 years ago, had died of illness a few years ago. Unlike Yang Feng, even after retirement, Chen Wanning was still the top boss of the Southeast Group. Chen Wanning came from the Chen clan of Beihai. He had served as the deputy speaker of Wuxia, the governor, the speaker of Beihai province, and the vice president. He could be said to be the absolute hardcore of the Wang family of Beihai. There was no Kunlun city more than 20 years ago. The Gu clan did not even have a member of parliament. They could not set off such a big storm only by relying on Kunlun city without high-level power. It was the most reasonable thing for the high level of the Wang family of Beihai to intervene. The procedure is wrong in this matter, Yang Feng said lightly. He knew about this matter. Naturally, he also knew Chen Wanning's role in it. Procedure no, he had said this many times in the past. At that time, the situation was urgent. The only person we could contact was Vice President Chen Wanning. Gu Qianchuan replied indifferently. According to the normal procedure, if there was a problem with the position of the commander of the Border Control Corps, Gu Xingyan should have reported it to Li Honghe, the top leader of the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State. Even if Li Honghe needed to avoid arousing suspicion, he could have reported the problem to Dongqing Hanguang, the then minister of the army headquarters, and reported it directly to Chen Wanning. The procedure was indeed wrong, or even outrageous. But compared with the treason case, this outrageous problem was nothing at all. Li Huaqing looked at Li Guangtu and said slowly, "Is Li Pingqing true?" He did not want to hear Li Pingqing's problem, but Li Guangtu's opinion. Li Pingqing once served as a major general of the Border Control Corps. When the treason case occurred, he finally died in the territory of Annan State. At that time, important information about the Great Wall Plan of Zhongzhou State was found on him. The Great Wall Plan was a weapon defense system used by Zhongzhou State to this day. After several updates, its performance became more and more stable. It could be regarded as one of the core secrets of Zhongzhou State. At that time, Li Guangtu authorized to get the Great Wall Plan, and had a call record with Li Pingqing. All these were recorded in the file. There was no doubt about it. Because of this, Li Guangtu's treason case quickly came to a conclusion when it caused a great sensation. When it happened, I didn't have any practice with Li Pingqing. Li Guangtu said lightly. Li Huaqing pondered and looked at Li Guangtu. Hu Song, the then minister of the Ministry of Information, intercepted my call signal with Li Pingqing. Where is Hu Song? Li Guangtu suddenly asked. Dead. Yang Feng said lightly. He glanced at Gu Qianchuan and said calmly. After the treason case, Hu Song was promoted to Major General of Zhongzhou State in the same year and transferred to the Ministry of National Defense. The next year he died in a car accident. Li Guangtu sneered and said nothing. This doesn't mean anything. Li Huaqing said slowly. It really doesn't mean anything. Li Guangtu nodded and said, but I'm not familiar with Li Pingqing. With his age and military rank, he didn't even have an important task in the Li family. At most, he was a little better than a marginal figure. He was at the peak of the fire-flaming realm in his 40s and exhausted his potential. If I really wanted to commit treason, why would I give him such an important task as stealing the Great Wall Plan? I was the Marshal of Zhongzhou State at that time. There were many experts in the Li family and many talents in the Border Control Corps. No matter how I looked for someone, it was not Li Pingqing's turn to perform such an important task for me. Li Huaqing narrowed his eyes and nodded. Li Guangtu was telling the truth, which could also be regarded as a doubt. With Li Pingqing's status at that time, Li Guangtu would not pay attention to him in any case, let alone let him perform such an important task. Similar doubts were everywhere in the treason case, but they were just speculations. In the face of conclusive evidence, they were not convincing. The most important thing is that I committed treason and joined Annan State? Li Guangtu sneered, and his voice sounded extremely cold in the dark cabin. Those who believed that I would commit treason at that time were fools. I was a marshal with real power in Zhongzhou State, controlling more than 100,000 of the most elite troops in Zhongzhou State. I entered the parliament of Zhongzhou State at the age of 30, and was the youngest member of parliament in Zhongzhou State. The Li family was the core force of Zhongzhou State, And my father was the war god of Zhongzhou state at that time. Without any accident, I was in the invincible realm at that time. Within 3 or 5 years, I could become the new generation of war god of Zhongzhou state. My status was no lower than that of any director in Zhongzhou state, and I even had more power and more freedom in some aspects. What reason did I have to commit treason? Benefits? What kind of benefits could move the Li family and me like that? Maybe there were such benefits, but could Tiannan afford them? Future? I didn't want the future of Zhongzhou state. What kind of future do I want? I committed treason and joined Annan state. Were those who believed in this at that time stupid? Or did they think I was stupid? Li Huaqing gave a wry smile. The treason case was still controversial until today, and the most fundamental reason was what Li Huaqing said. The evidence of Li Guangtu's treason was conclusive. But he had no motive and no reason. Zhongzhou state was the most powerful country in the world. It was the same more than 20 years ago, even more powerful than it was now. Li Guangtu himself stood at the top of Zhongzhou state. He had all the benefits in future he should have. What Annan state could give, Zhongzhou state could also give and give more. Annan state could not move Li Guangtu at all, let alone make him commit treason. This approach was as ridiculous as an ambitious hero giving up the great country he had worked for to be a lackey for an ordinary gangster. But the evidence is conclusive. You did contact Li Pingcheng. How do you explain it? Gu Qianchuan suddenly asked. I didn't contact him. Li Guangtu suddenly paused and narrowed his eyes. Guangtu, what do you want to say? Yang Feng's heart moved. Li Guangtu was silent for a long time, and then slowly said, Li Shi was by my side. His eyes became more indifferent and disgusted. Gu Qianchuan smiled. With strong provocation in his eyes, he said meaningfully, Li Shi is by your side now. Li Guangtu gave him a cold look and did not speak. It was well known that Li Shi was Li Guangtu's woman at that time. Therefore Li Shi personally testified in Li Guangtu's treason case, which was a powerful blow to pull the Li family down from the clouds. And now, Li Shi became the wife of the governor of Kunlun City, but she betrayed Kunlun City and once again stood by Li Guangtu's side. Even if she appeared again to testify for Li Guangtu that he did not commit treason, how credible could it be? Chapter 688. Everyone knew the meaning of Gu Qianchuan's words. To some extent, the treason case was not complicated, but it was unsolvable. The Major General of the Border Control Corps and the Minister of Information Department of the Corps were two key figures, but the key figures were dead. As for Li Guangtu, he was the person concerned and could only represent his own position. The other people who participated in the treason case were also people who benefited from it. The Wang family of Beihai would certainly not disclose the truth of the treason case. Summer Solstice united with Kunlun City, and Kunlun City contributed a lot. But after the incident broke out, the high-level pressure was all operated by the Wang family of Beihai. No matter how many causes there were, at least in this matter alone, the Wang family of Beihai was not glorious. If they disclosed the truth, it was impossible. As for Kunlun City, it was even more impossible. If Li Guangtu had not been exposed, the massacre of more than 100,000 troops of the Border Control Corps would have been blamed on Kunlun City. This was a real disaster. In this way, Li Shi became extremely critical. Everyone understood Gu Qianchuan's meaning. Everyone also understood Li Guangtu's meaning. At that time, Li Guangtu did not guard against Li Shi. She was by Li Guangtu's side. When the incident happened, if Li Guangtu contacted Li Pingcheng, it could only be done by Li Shi, and she received orders from Kunlun City. This was Li Guangtu's subtext. As for the Minister of Information Department, he was mostly from Kunlun City or the Wang family of Beihai, so that he could forge Li Guangtu's authority and get in touch with the Great Wall Plan. This was actually not important. After all, Li Pingcheng and the Minister of Information Department had been dead for many years. Any evidence had been wiped out. Now the only key figure was Li Shi. Li Shi stood by Li Guangtu's side. At the end of the treason case, she personally admitted that Li Guangtu had committed treason. No matter how the outside world really felt about her, It was not an exaggeration to say that her approach was righteous to put family before righteousness. She had already testified once. Later, she joined Kunlun City and became the wife of the governor. If she told the truth in this capacity and proved that Li Guangtu did not commit treason, Zhongzhou state could accept it and launch an investigation. But now Li Shi stood by Li Guangtu in the chaos of Eastern Europe. Under such circumstances, what was the point of her telling the so-called truth? The meaning of a witness had long become untrustworthy with her constant wavering. Even if Li Shi told the truth now, Kunlun City could easily say that Li Shi was slandering them. Now Li Shi could not be regarded as evidence. Li Shi was not the evidence, which meant that there was no evidence in the case of treason. If this kind of problem were to be solved by arguing, there wouldn't be any results even if they talked for 100 years. Li Guangtu narrowed his eyes and looked at Gu Qianchuan. Fearless. He suddenly asked. For Zhongzhou state. Gu Qianchuan was indifferent. Li Guangtu smiled and didn't say much. After all, Gu Qianchuan's account of the treason case was too general. Although everything that happened that year was not perfect, it was an extremely sophisticated scheme. Some details were suspicious everywhere. Li Shi could no longer be regarded as evidence now. However, Li Guangtu was the person involved. How could it be possible that he didn't know anything? If he told them everything he knew, Kunlun City would definitely be in trouble. However, Kunlun City was full of troubles, which was not what Li Guangtu wanted. It was not even attractive to him at all. It doesn't matter what the truth is. Li Guangtu said lightly, more than 20 years ago, I had a clear conscience about Zhongzhou state. Li Guangtu slowly sat up straight, looked into his eyes and said in a deep voice, what about more than 20 years later? Today, more than 20 years later, Zhongzhou state feels guilty about me. It doesn't matter. But I will take back what used to belong to me. Li Guangtu's voice was calm. He was telling the truth. Perhaps many people cared about the truth of that year, but as the person involved, he didn't care about it the most. The so-called innocence seemed ridiculous at their level. Treason or any other crime was good. In the final analysis, it was actually a failure. The treason case was just a conspiracy of Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai. He lost, so he had to leave Zhongzhou state with the crime. It had nothing to do with right or wrong, loyalty or treachery. Only success or failure determined everything. That was all. Therefore, Li Guangtu didn't care about the so-called truth. He only cared about gains and losses. In the room that fell silent again, he turned his head and looked out of the window. The night had completely fallen. Outside the room, there was still a faint noise. Li Guangtu didn't need to look to know that at this moment, many people were surrounding Li Tianlan with money, resources and power, trying to help Li Tianlan plan the future of the Li family. The Li family that belonged to Li Tianlan. Li Guangtu's eyes were a little cold. Compared with Kunlun City, Li Tianlan was the biggest problem that he needed to consider first. When he met Li Huaqing today, he didn't intend to figure out the so-called truth from the beginning. But in the more than 20 years of losing contact with Zhongzhou state, it had always been Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai guiding the direction of the treason case. Li Guangtu met Li Huaqing today to provide Zhongzhou state with a new perspective, a perspective of the Li family to look at the treason case many years ago. This was the premise for his return to Zhongzhou state in the future. His injury could be healed, and the purgatory of heaven capital would not be divided. When his injury was healed and he returned to Zhongzhou state with the purgatory of heaven capital, what was Kunlun City? Li Guangtu didn't deny that he looked down on Kunlun City. He really looked down on it. How deep could a so-called martial arts force that had been bowing to the Li family have after more than 20 years of development? Kun looking up and down in Kunlun City, there was no one who could attract Li Guangtu's attention at all. In contrast, Li Tianlan was the one who made him feel threatened. To resist foreign aggression, one must first stabilize the internal situation. Li Guangtu would only attack Kunlun City when the internal problems were solved. Otherwise, even if he took out the so-called truth today and beat Kunlun City beyond redemption, it would be meaningless for him. After all, from the standpoint of Zhongzhou state, even if Kunlun City was destroyed, Zhongzhou state would be more willing to hand over the special warfare system to Li Tianlan, the future heavenly son, than to consider Li Kuangtu, whose standpoint was subtle. Li Kuangtu dared to let Kunlun City continue to occupy the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State, but he dared not let Li Tianlan sit in that position. So as long as he met Li Huaqing today, and let Li Huaqing give him a vague attitude, this meeting would be perfect. And his requirements were not high at all. Li Kuangtu turned his eyes and looked at Li Huaqing, saying nothing. Now he was far more mature than Li Tianlan, so he knew better that when a superior faced grievances, the so-called revenge was not the most important thing. The important thing was profit. It was a complete failure for him to take down Kunlun City in a short period of time, if he couldn't swallow it himself. Zhongzhou State will set up a task force to reinvestigate the treason case, more than 20 years ago. The task force will be directly responsible to me. Personally, I am willing to believe in the loyalty of the Li family. Li Huaqing looked into Li Kuangtu's eyes and said seriously. Gu Qianchuan frowned and looked a little pale. The establishment of the task force made him feel uncomfortable, but what made him more uncomfortable was that Li Huaqing had been emphasizing his personal opinion. Of course, I also have absolute trust in Kunlun City. Li Huaqing suddenly smiled and said, "There is something strange about what happened that year. I will urge people to investigate. Maybe it is a misunderstanding." Misunderstanding? Li Kuangtu smiled a little coldly. Li Huaqing waved his hand and said slowly, "Anyway, the Li family has done meritorious service to Zhongzhou State. If you are treated unfairly, Zhongzhou State will try its best to prove your innocence. Before this matter is investigated clearly, I will persuade the parliament not to take measures against you. During this time, you can rest assured to recuperate in Zhongzhou State. Don't worry. Rest assured to recuperate in Zhongzhou State," Li Kuangtu said with a faint smile. "What if I want to go back to East Island?" Li Huaqing's eyes suddenly condensed and became extremely deep in an instant. Li Kuangtu looked at him calmly and said nothing. The atmosphere seemed to freeze in an instant. Yang Feng wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Finally, he did not speak. "It's up to you." After a long time, Li Huaqing said calmly, "You can go back to East Island." He did not say but everyone knew that once Li Huaqing returned to East Island, it was tantamount to a real treason. Then the old things that happened many years ago were even less important. The whole purgatory of Heaven Capital would face the suppression of Zhongzhou State. "Confirm." Li Huaqing laughed. "Are you going back to East Island?" His voice was calm, but he looked extremely majestic and powerful in the dim light. "I won't give up the territory of East Island," Li Kuangtu said flatly. "How are you going to deal with Wuji Palace and Jifeng Sword Training School?" Li Huaqing frowned and said, "And the royal family of East Island?" "Daybreak!" Li Kuangtu shouted. Daybreak, who had been hiding in the dark silently, took a step forward silently. "You stay in Heaven Capital. Deal with Wuji Palace and Jifeng Sword Training School," Li Kuangtu continued to order. "Okay." Without any hesitation, Daybreak nodded. "What about the others?" "The others?" Li Kuangtu hesitated and finally made up his mind. He said flatly, "Most of the forces of the purgatory of Heaven Capital have begun to move to Tiannan. You are also responsible for this." "Got it." Daybreak nodded. Even though he knew very well that he would be suppressed by Jifeng Sword Training School and Wuji Palace during the transfer, Li Huaqing did not speak and was deep in thought. "I will also go to Tiannan." Li Kuangtu said flatly, "I won't return to East Island or Zhongzhou State. Tiannan is the best buffer zone. Even if the royal family doubts, they will not continue to support the purgatory of Heaven Capital, but they will not completely turn against them. So the main opponents of the purgatory of Heaven Capital in East Island are Jifeng Sword Training School and Wuji Palace." He glanced at Li Huaqing and suddenly said, "I want to make a deal with Zhongzhou State." "Go ahead." Li Huaqing raised his eyebrows in surprise. "How about exchanging the future special warfare system of East Island for a promise from Zhongzhou State?" Li Kuangtu laughed. "The purgatory of Heaven Capital has been operating in East Island for 3 years. Its foundation is not as solid as a rock, but everything has been stabilized. That is my foundation, and I can't give it up." When I return to Zhongzhou State in the future, the special warfare system of East Island will naturally belong to Zhongzhou State. A very subtle change appeared on Li Huaqing's face. East Island's position was extremely important. In international games, East Island was often the first ally that some international powers tried to rope in when they were fighting with Zhongzhou State. And although East Island's territory was small, it was ambitious. Especially in recent years, with the ups and downs of the situation in Zhongzhou State, East Island had exposed its ambition for the southern end of Beihai several times. Obviously, they dreamed of recovering their lost land, and even wanted to invade Zhongzhou State again. Zhongzhou State had always wanted to control the special warfare system of East Island. If Li Huaqing was willing to return to Zhongzhou State, it would be a good opportunity. But now the Purgatory of Heaven capital. He shook his head and said softly, I don't think the Purgatory of Heaven capital has this ability now. Li Huaqing was seriously injured and could not fight in the next few years. Without Li Huaqing, the Purgatory of Heaven capital would not be able to fight. Without Li Huaqing, it would be hard for the Purgatory of Heaven capital to face the suppression of Jifeng Sword Reigning School and Wuji Palace, especially the royal family. The Purgatory of Heaven capital temporarily retreated to Tiannan. The royal family might not take any action for a while, but the royal family's patience was limited. If Li Huaqing did not make a choice, the royal family would definitely take action against the Purgatory of Heaven capital. The special warfare system of East Island was indeed very good, but if the Purgatory of Heaven capital could not be held, it would be an empty promise. So this has something to do with the promise I want. Li Huaqing's tone was calm. Li Huaqing narrowed his eyes and said, What promise do you want? The Purgatory of Heaven capital will develop in Tiannan, and Daybreak will guard East Island. At most, it can guard Heaven capital. I need enough strength to take back East Island. So I hope that the Purgatory of Heaven capital will develop in Tiannan and accumulate strength. If there is any conflict with Emperor East's palace, Zhongzhou State will not intervene. Li Huaqing directly pointed out the most sensitive issue. By then Tiannan and East Island will belong to Zhongzhou State. They will also belong to the Li family. Huangtu. Yang Feng finally couldn't help but frown and shout. Tianlan is also a member of the Li family. So is Emperor East's palace. Li Huangtu was expressionless and stubbornly said, The Li family can only be my Li family. He looked at Li Huaqing and said, What do you think? Tianlan is a talent that Zhongzhou State focuses on supporting. I can't give you an answer on this matter. It must be discussed by the parliament. But we still hope that you and Tianlan can live in peace. After all, we are a family, Li Huaqing said. Li Huangtu was silent for a long time, and then lightly repeated, The Li family is my Li family. Kunlun City can send people to help the Purgatory of Heaven capital guard Heaven capital. Gu Qianchuan suddenly said, We are willing to bear part of the pressure from Jifeng Sword Reigning School and Wuji Palace. Kunlun City's help would undoubtedly increase the hope of the Purgatory of Heaven capital to take East Island in the future, which was equivalent to increasing Li Huaqing's bargaining chips. The special warfare system of East Island was important enough. Once they saw a great possibility, they might really give Li Huaqing the promise he needed. At that time, Li Tianlan and Li Huaqing would have a good time fighting in Tiannan, and Kunlun City, which got involved in East Island, could secretly plot the special warfare system of East Island. For Gu Qianchuan, everything was perfect. What is Kunlun City? In the soft and weird voice, Daybreak said with a cold smile, When does the Purgatory of Heaven capital need the help of a third-rate force like Kunlun City? Not only Gu Qianchuan, but also Li Huaqing's face darkened. Was Kunlun City a third-rate force? Even if Kunlun City is not qualified, there are 2 invincible realm experts in it. How many are there in the Purgatory of Heaven capital? Gu Qianchuan sneered rudely. In the dark, Daybreak took another step forward, looked at Gu Qianchuan, and lightly said, You seem to be a little unconvinced? So what? Gu Qianchuan slowly stood up, his voice cold. If you're not convinced, then go to hell. In the calm voice, Daybreak raised his palm. Buzz. The violent sword energy tore the darkness in an instant and burst out from Daybreak's hand without warning. A dazzling light suddenly appeared in the dark cabin. Countless sword energy swept and whistled like a tide. All the sword energy passed Yangfeng and Li Huaqing and came to Gu Qianchuan in a flash. Gu Qianchuan, who looked pale, was unprepared. He hurriedly raised his one arm to resist. Daybreak clenched his fist. The sharp sword qi suddenly turned into an incomparably majestic force, smashed the domain that Gu Qianchuan had condensed in a hurry, and blasted him. Boom! A big hole was broken in the wooden cabin, and Gu Qianchuan's body flew out with blood. The violent force poured out of the cabin and spread between heaven and earth. The whole night and the endless wind and rain seemed to be completely twisted and deformed in the roaring force. Outside the cabin, Li Tianlan, who was entangled by the crowd, suddenly raised his head. In his sight, Gu Qianchuan, who was stained with blood, was smashed out like a cannonball. Intentionally or unintentionally, he fell exactly where Li Tianlan was. The wind whistled, and the momentum was heavy. The endless sword intent turned into a force surging wildly. This blow was the power of the invincible realm. He was the second invincible realm expert in the purgatory of Heaven Capital. Daybreak. The serious injury in the chaos in Eastern Europe did not make him lose his fighting spirit. Instead, it completely burned his potential. After the chaos, he directly rushed into the domain of the invincible realm with serious injuries. Although his realm was still somewhat unstable, it was still the strength of the invincible realm. Li Tianlan frowned and raised his palm. The wind was calm, but in an instant, everyone present was awestruck. At this moment, the whole world seemed to turn into a stream of sword energy with Li Tianlan's movements. It was dignified, complete, and natural. The vast sword energy rolled through everyone's bodies and once again blew Gu Qianchuan's body away. In the night sky, the mighty force was constantly obliterated along the way by the sword energy. The overall direction of the movement was the cabin with a hole. The constantly erupting force completely disappeared under the suppression of the sword intent. In the dark environment of the cabin, Daybreak suddenly took a few steps back. With a muffled groan, 2 streams of blood came out of his nostrils. Li Tianlan put down his palm, and his eyes were cold. In the cabin, Li Guangta looked at Daybreak and asked attentively, "How is it?" Daybreak gave a wry smile and shook his head. Li Tianlan's voice sounded through the night, extremely cold. "This is the Li family's territory. Do you really think you can do whatever you want here when you enter the invincible realm? Do you think I haven't killed an invincible realm expert? That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.